IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It's Monday. We're back to our normal routine. That means it's time for the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour. You all know who that dude is. That's Ryan Roberts, the director of recruiting at Irish Breakdown. I'm Brian Driscoll. And Ryan, let's just dive right into it, man. Notre Dame had the last of their big 2024 recruiting weekends. A lot of people said, why aren't they bringing in recruits next weekend? They are. It's just 25 kids because everybody from 24 that's going to visit the summer has been on campus. So, Ryan, let's dive into it. This was a small weekend, but a very important weekend. And I would argue that this weekend, including last week's camp, but more so this recruiting weekend, is going to go a long, long way towards determining if Notre Dame can finish strong at the two positions that we have the most concern. You had this weekend Kingston Viliama-Asa on campus this weekend, a linebacker from St. John Bosco out in California. We had Malcolm Ziegler on campus this weekend, a safety, a very fast athletic safety from Fuqua-Varina in North Carolina. And, of course, Maryland, D.C. guy Keyshawn Flowers this weekend, plus a lot of Notre Dame commits, Ryan. So let's just dive right into it and get started. Obviously, the big name, the big-time player, a guy that some people would argue is the best defensive player left on the board, at least the most important defensive player on the board. That's arguable. But it's him and Justin Scott. That's where it's at. If this class is going to be elite on defense, they need those two guys in the class. So Kingston was on campus this weekend, Ryan. I believe third time he's been on campus at Notre Dame. It's Notre Dame. USC's been making a move. You got Ohio State coming up next weekend. Everybody thinks they're the favorite for Kingston. Coming into the visit, at least that's the perception-wise, Ryan. Coming out, you've had a chance to speak with some folks about this one. I have as well. Let's talk about how things went this weekend with Kingston and where things stand for the Irish and him.
I mean, I think it went about as good as it could have, as well as it could have this past weekend. Like you said, Brian, this is a young man that's been on campus the third time here, has been on campus the last two blue and gold games. So blue gold game in 2022, then the blue gold game of this year, obviously. Official visit, we know coming into the weekend, like you said, you had USC, you had Notre Dame, you had Ohio State. Those are the three officials. That was the three top schools. We knew everything stood with Kingston Viliama-Asa. Now, entering the weekend, I was on full transparency that I think that it was a Notre Dame-Ohio State battle, even after USC seemed to have really – I think that they really seemed to have made a move last weekend, but I was still on board that I still think it was a Notre Dame-Ohio State battle kind of going into this one.
Yes, Can I ask you something on that, Ryan? Do you feel like USC simply just kind of threw their hat into the ring, basically – that it was going to take bad visits happening at other places for them to really is that kind of not bad visits, but just those teams kind of knocking it off? It just seems like they've just been playing catch up with him for a long time.
I think so, because I think the thing with so for me, it was Notre Dame, Ohio State was at the top two. Like that was the pecking order. Whatever order you wanted to throw at, I would have accepted it, right? Because there were some days, I think you've said this before, like there were some days where I think Notre Dame's the clear leader. Then there's other days where I think Ohio State's the clear leader. Like it's literally a jockeying back and forth to that top spot. And I just think that USC is in the battle, but I think that they were the distant third. I think there was a little bit of a tier break to who the third school is for Kingston. But coming out of the visit, I mean, I think that Notre Dame showed Kingston exactly everything that they needed to because they remained consistent with him, right? It was about, we have the whole gambit going after you, man. Marcus Freeman, Al Golden, Al Washington, Max Bulla, they're all a part of this recruitment. There has never been a debate that Kingston is an absolute priority for this staff, and they have thrown every voice out there to try to make him feel like he needs to be a part of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We talked about the spirituality that he has. We talked about it's the personality he has that I think really would fit well in at Notre Dame. So I think coming into this weekend, this wasn't as much about Kingston for me. This was about Kingston's family, right? Because they had not taken a ton of visits, and I'm talking about mom specifically. The big thing about these official visits is getting his parents, getting mom to be able to talk to the USC staff, to the Notre Dame staff, the Ohio State staff, and really get everyone's feedback in this thing. This isn't just about Kingston. This is going to be a family decision. And I think that the biggest thing that came out of this weekend is that I think Notre Dame is an ally to the Viliamoasa family. I think that they all value Notre Dame. They value the fit that of Kingston fitting in with the program as a student, as an athlete, and spiritually. And I really think that coming into this week, there was a jockeying of who that number one team is for Kingston. I think that Notre Dame is firmly in the lead, and I think that they are now setting themselves up to, just have to outlast Ohio State for that last official visit, and this one could be theirs, because I really think that they won over not only Kingston this past weekend, but I think they won over the family as well. I think they showed him everything he needed to see.
That's a big one, Ryan, because you've talked about this for a while. Kingston's going to make his own decision. His family's going to allow him to make his own decision. He's going to do what's best for him. You've always kind of got the feeling he kind of wanted to blaze a different trail, right? So not follow all the other California kids to USC. And there was always this thought that the Midwestern schools were ahead for him for a long time. He's going to be allowed to make his own decision. He's encouraged to make his own decision. This is his life, all those type of things. But he's also a kid that's very close with his family. And there's a lot of trust and faith there. So he is going to at least allow his family to have a say into kind of helping them steer him towards the decision. So I think being able to get the family on campus, being able to get them to realize kind of everything that Notre Dame has to offer, as you said. And I believe this was Mom's first visit to Notre Dame.
Correct.
I believe.
Correct. I don't think his mom's taken any visits with him other than these officials. So yeah, it's been interesting.
That's going to be big. And so now it's like you always felt like Notre Dame, as you said, was sort of jockeying position. And here's what it comes down to with recruitments like this, Ryan. You've got to find those one or two things that you can have to separate you from the other schools that he likes. Because this kid loves USC. He loves Ohio State. There's other programs he likes a lot too. These are the three that stand the most. So what could Notre Dame do during this visit to set him apart? And I think getting the family to be able to see the differences between Notre Dame and everyone else when it comes to the spiritual aspects, when it comes to the academic aspects, when it comes to the things that they do, not just academically as far as strength of the academic profile, but what they do to support student athletes when it comes to the academic side of things are all very things that are very moving for parents when they visit during officials, is to really sit down and get to know the ins and outs of how that process works.
Yeah.
So being able to let mom and the family see that, I think, is going to be huge. But as you said, they got to weather that Buckeye storm, and that's easier said than done. But Notre Dame has certainly, as Ryan said, put themselves in a position where now it's about maintain, don't lose ground, as opposed to needing to make up ground. And Ryan, at the end of the day, that's where you want to be for a kid like this. Like, we're going to talk about another kid that we don't know if Notre Dame necessarily came out of the weekend as the leader. And sometimes that can be concerning. Sometimes that can't. When it can be concerning is when it's a kid that you don't have a whole lot else to sell. Right. You don't have a whole lot else to get across to him. The relationship is established. You've been recruiting this kid for well over a year. Al Washington's been recruiting him for over 2 years. There's not a whole lot else there. So if you can't come out of this weekend sort of sitting in pole position, you're going to be in trouble. And that's exactly what Notre Dame did. They put themselves in pole position. Now it's like, okay, you've got a tough one coming up this weekend. What do you do from here until decision-making day to maintain that? And I think that's going to be the important thing, because that Buckeye visit this weekend is going to be the thing that a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to have hanging over their head, to not let them get too excited about the news that we're sharing to them. And understandably so, Ryan.
Well, and I would say this about Kingston too. It's so unique, Brian, because I feel like not every, that's very hyperbolic. There's a lot of recruits that I talked about on this show where I'm just like, they like the glitz, they like the glamour, they like the frivolous stuff. They like to, because recruiting is it's a flashy thing, right? It's about the photo shoots and the graphics that they send to all these kids. And it's about basically catching the recruit's eyes. That's really kind of what it comes down to. Kingston's not one of those kids. He's not. If you've ever talked to Kingston, he's one of those young men that he's just looking for the best fit, man. Like that's all it is, like there's some kids that want to run the social media side of things, and they want to, take care of themselves from an NIL perspective, even though it's actually just a payout stuff. Like, this just isn't what Kingston has been built off of. These visits are about consistency, in my opinion, from these programs. There's no new pitch, to your point. There's none. Notre Dame didn't come out and have this new elaborate pitch of this is how we're going to use you in the defense. This is why you're the best fit ever. It's been consistent for months and months and months. There's no new
we've been
pitch.
holding back on this little bit of information until now.
There's no last ditch efforts. This is clearly, I would say it like this. I don't know if Kingston would quite quantify it this way, but I think that these visits are more for his family than it is for him. He's seen Notre Dame. He's talked to these coaches. He has relationships with them. He hasn't seen anything at He didn't see anything at Notre Dame over the weekend, from the grotto to the facilities to the stadium to whatever, that he hasn't seen before. He's seen everything that he needs to see from the University of Notre Dame. He's seen everything that he needs to see from Ohio State. He's seen everything and more from USC, a school that's right in his backyard. Who hasn't seen it enough is the family, to get their input, to really put a bow on this recruitment. This was about a full understanding from the Viliamo Asta family to fully understand what's the best fit, where would I thrive, where would I have the best option to develop into the best version of myself. And if that's Notre Dame, I think that Notre Dame did a good job of selling that to the family more than Kingston this weekend. There was no new pitch. This was just about giving the full scope of understanding to the loved ones and the support system around him as well.
I think that's important too, Ryan, because when it comes to family, a lot of times parents of kids who fit at Notre Dame, they don't want to hear the pitch. They don't want to hear some angle. They don't want to walk on campus and see 15 really super expensive cars that none of them can afford, as if that's going to be something that says, hey, look how great we are. And I'm talking about what we saw at Texas this weekend. It's not really what parents that are going to want like Notre Dame are about. So it's about the genuineness. And I think that there's an importance to consistency of messaging. And I think that's something Notre Dame's done a very good job with when it comes to Kingston, is a consistency of messaging. It's like, hey, man, we're not trying to sell you some new pitch. We're not worried about this school. So we're going to come out with something that we think is going to really wow you to get you over the edge. It's about, here's who we are, man. Here's how we envision you being here. And then just building that relationship. And Notre Dame has done that. Another player that was on campus this weekend, Ryan, that was a very important player for Notre Dame, is Malcolm Ziegler, who's a safety. Yes. Obviously, the safety board is problematic as of right now. You have Kennedy Urlacher in the class. Notre Dame is going to find out next weekend, this upcoming weekend. Bronte Johnson is going to announce his commitment somewhere on Saturday. Feel very good about where Notre Dame is on that one. But you really need a third impact safety. They recently offered Tabron Benny Powell. We feel like Notre Dame is in an unbeatable place there. We'll see kind of how that one closes over the next couple of days. But that's not a needle mover. That's not a gap closer for Notre Dame. If Notre Dame is going to have the kind of safety class it needs to match the rest of the defense and the rest of the class and to fill the needs on the roster, they need another safety that can impact that. Malcolm Ziegler is that kind of player in a lot of different ways, Ryan. But coming in, Notre Dame was in trail mode.
Yes.
How did things go this weekend? Was Notre Dame able to make a move or not?
Well, it's been a really fascinating recruitment. I mean, to your point, Brian, this is a player that was just offered just last month. I mean, Notre Dame had been doing their research and doing their digging on him. They'd been out to see him a couple of times before that, but a player that's still very new to the board. And he spoke a little bit about the fact that his relationship with Chris O'Leary is still very new. That's something that is still kind of developing. I do think after this weekend that he meshed very well with Chris O'Leary. And I think that the Notre Dame coaching staff did a tremendous tactical job this weekend, in my opinion, of getting all three North Carolina players in the 2024 class on campus. You got Bryce Young, you got Jack Larson, you got Micah Gilbert, to make them feel comfortable. Because that's one thing when you're talking about a guy that hasn't been recruited or hasn't been on the board that long, you want to make them feel comfortable when they get to campus to really see if it's somewhere where they fit. So I think Notre Dame did a tremendous job to make him feel comfortable. I know Adon Schulder was also his host during this visit as well. So he got kind of the crash course of great young men and great vantage points and similar backgrounds, which I think made it feel really comfortable for him. Chris O'Leary did a good job, I think, for meshing with him for a guy that hasn't been on the board that long. And two important things that I think were very beneficial to him, to Malcolm Ziegler, is one, the 4 for 40, because I think that does stick with him specifically because Malcolm's a really talented athlete. I mean, we're talking about a kid that is 6'2", 190 plus pounds, reportedly runs in the high 4.3s in the 40-yard dash. He's a really good track athlete. So you have to think if he's developed properly, maybe has a chance to play at the next level when all is said and done, the NFL level, but he's very concerned about the long term. You know, how can a school set me up to be successful long term? So 4 for 40 is important. The other thing that I thought was interesting, Brian, is that we know that Notre Dame needs high quality safeties and high quality cover men in this class. But Notre Dame sold him on the versatility that he could bring to a defense, not just playing safety, playing either safety spot, playing some nickel, coming in and having the opportunity to really compete for playing time, right? To be able to get onto the fields. So I think Notre Dame did a very good job this weekend. I think that for me, it's just, did they get on it a little too late? Right? Where are they going to end up in the conversation? But I think they made a nice move here. It's just about, is the move enough? And we'll know more about that obviously in the next couple of weeks.
That's going to be the thing. This is still a recruitment that's relatively new for Notre Dame. And so the question is going to be, I don't know if it was realistic to expect Notre Dame to come out of this weekend with a commitment or even necessarily as the leader. What you needed to do was put yourself in a position to where you could look at him and say, okay, is South Carolina, is North Carolina, are those Carolina teams that we said last week were the teams that you really, that right now are in best position? Did you put yourself in a good enough position to where you can now spend the next 2, 3, 4 weeks before he decides in July to where you can eventually get there? And how much ground can you make up? And from what my sources have told me, Ryan, kind of backs up what you said. Notre Dame made up a ton of ground. But this is one where there's still work to be done. It's different than Kingston, where it's like, okay, you've done the work over the last year. Now hold on. This is a kid I think they offered in what, March or April, May, maybe
literally last month. It
was literally in May,
yes.
Right? So you got down and you saw him at your high school and during the open period and all that kind of stuff. But it's a new relationship. Now we could debate all day long. Why did it take you this long to get on this kid? That's a different conversation for a different day. But I think with where they are, I think that they did a nice job making the move. And I think the point you made earlier too, Ryan, getting all those North Carolina kids on campus was huge. That's so important because these are kids he knows. They play at schools he's very familiar with. I can assure you of that. And so strategically, it's hard for me to think of how Notre Dame could have done a better job this weekend. Now, we could argue that maybe getting on them sooner and all that. That's all fair game. But that's a kind of a conversation we'll have when we get down to signing day and we see what this class is and what they can do better as they continue to move forward. But I think that was a really smart strategy, Ryan.
Well, I think it was because I really think, because originally I thought it was just going to be Micah Gilbert was the only North Carolina guy, but then you see Bryce Young was on campus, Jack Lawson was on campus. I think just comfortable, right, Brian? Like I want to make this kid comfortable to see how he truly fits with the program. So I think it was incredibly smart, very tactical by the Notre Dame coaching staff and the recruiting side of things, the recruiting staff. So I think that Notre Dame did is, again, it comes back to Kingston that I just talked about. I think they did about as well as they could have with Malcolm Ziegler for where this recruitment was coming into the weekend. I couldn't imagine it have gone much better. And the great thing is that we'll have some understanding of this one very shortly. He only has one official visit left to North Carolina. And then the plan is sit down, make a decision in July. Like this isn't one that's going to work into the fall and work towards signing day. Like we're going to know where Malcolm Ziegler is going to commit to over the next few weeks. Like it's not going to be a long haul. So if Notre Dame does have to pivot, if they have to expand the board, if they have to do whatever, if they're not able to close on him, then we'll deal with that obviously when that comes. But I think that you have put yourself in a good spot. You are near the top of the board now with Malcolm Ziegler. It's now about next few weeks continuing to build that relationship, even though he's not going to be in person, continuing to stay on him, recruit him to the very end, and then see where the chips lie when the final decision is made.
Third official visitor on campus this weekend, Ryan, was linebacker Keyshawn Flowers. There's not a lot we're going to have to say about that one. Let's just kind of quickly touch on, where we see that recruitment trending coming out of this visit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he was another one that you were in catch-up mode, obviously, right? Like this is one, and you were in catch-up mode in a different way of you just don't know. You didn't know how the linebacker board was going to shape out. You didn't know if he was going to be the guy that was going to be near the top for as far as like another option at the linebacker position. I think you went into the weekend and you did well for yourselves as far as I think Keyshawn Flowers had a good visit to Notre Dame. I just don't know if that one is going to be one that is going to be pressed. And I don't know if that's going to be one that's going to be, just a fit ultimately when it's all said and done. Because we are trending to the end of the linebacker board. I mean, we just talked about Kingston and how you feel that they're in a good spot with Notre Dame. And you already have commitments from Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak in the 2024 class as well. So just isn't a ton of linebacker spots open. It was a good visit for Keyshawn Flowers. I just don't know if that fit is ultimately going to make sense when the final whistle blows.
So Ryan, that kind of wraps up this weekend's visits. And so what we're going to do next is as we get close to as we conclude this part of it, because again, there's only 3 non-committed official visitors on campus this weekend, is we're going to move on to sort of a hot board type of aspect of the show. We're going to really just break down here's where they are in 2024 recruiting. I did want to note again, I want to remind people that they're not, some buddies like, oh, so they're not bringing them in next weekend. They can kind of relax. And I'm like, no, they're not relaxed. They have like multiple camps this weekend. They're going to have 25 kids on campus next weekend.
They have Devin Williams and Owen Strebig. And there's going to be some dudes on campus.
Plenty of kids going to be on campus this week. So they're not taking the next week off. That's for sure. No. But before we move on to that, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you have not done so, when this show's over, go sign up for the message boards. We're going to have a lot on there. Ryan has some intel pieces. He dives into a little bit deeper into those 2 recruitments. We'll have some more recruiting intel coming out this week, just kind of resetting the board, give you all some little insight stuff, great conversation, all types of fun stuff on there. So make sure you check that out. And of course, if you have not done so, we would greatly appreciate if you're listening via podcast platform, give us a 5-star review. It would mean a lot. So let's dive into sort of we can call it just setting the board, hot board, whatever the case may be. So what we're going to do, Ryan, is we're going to kind of go through just who's left on the board. And I just wrote it all out. It's not very long. It's not a long list of guys that we know right now. And so we're going to dive into that and just kind of say, okay, where do we think Notre Dame is trending with these recruitments? And then when we're done with that, we will have a mailbag. So a lot of you already put in mailbag questions. If you want to have a question asked, and then have us answer, go ahead and throw that in the mailbag now. So let's just let's dive into this, Ryan, and let's first begin. I think it's important to discuss where they are with the commits, because I think that's an important thing. Is Notre Dame can't afford to losing the guys that are into class, and getting them all on campus this summer. Some of them were officials, some of them were unofficials, but getting kids on campus was big this weekend. Getting them around together was really important. And one thing I've heard from a couple sources is a lot of people think that, oh, you're getting these commits on campus so that they can help the uncommitted players. That's obviously part of it, obviously. But Notre Dame also looked at this a little bit differently, and I think this is something where maybe they learned their lesson from last year. When these kids are taking their official visits, don't take them for granted as if they're in the class and just go out there and say, hey, you're going to help us get these other kids. Notre Dame did a lot on the officials with the committed players to make sure that they felt the love, that they got the attention, because, hey, you are the ones in the class. And I think that was really smart. So as of right now, 19 kids in the class publicly. I feel good about where Notre Dame stands right now. Who knows what's going to happen by signing day? That's just the caveat you always got to throw in. It's kind of like, well, if no one gets injured, they should be good here, right? But right now, of the 19 kids in the class, I feel great about where Notre Dame is. There's no one we're hearing about wavering or anything like that. And so, like where that one is. Now it's about closing. I could see them getting up to 25, 26. I could see them kind of going smaller than that if they don't get the right players, and then saying we're going to focus on 25, because here's one thing that the Notre Dame, I'm confident, and I would say I'm certain that the Notre Dame coaches know this, Ryan, that the 25 class is absolutely loaded. Notre Dame also has a very young roster. And there was a time where Notre Dame was really focusing on 25, 26 and really loading up in this class. I think they've decided we'll only load up if we get this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy type of situation, right? So there's still a chance they go big, but they're not going to force themselves up to 25, 26 because they want to have as much left over for next year. So if they don't land dudes in this class for the most part, they're going to focus on the big-time players in the 25 class, because it's a loaded class, and they've had a ton of 25 kids on board. You and I, Brian, so we're going to have Brian Smith on with you on some of these shows here moving forward, too, to have you guys talk about some of these 25 kids. We're going to be breaking down the 25 board a lot this summer after this, because it's like, okay, 24, like we know who they are, right? Yeah. So, Ryan, let's go kind of player by player, and I'm going to kind of set you up and just give the where things stand as of today.
Sure.
You know, who are the contenders? How do you feel where Notre Dame is? Are they moving in the right direction? Are they not moving in the right direction? And then we're going to make have some little bit of fun and maybe make some. I don't know. You want to do some predictions, Ryan? You want to have some fun with some predictions, or maybe confidence
we got
level?
our crystal ball. We're gonna crystal ball
Maybe
out.
confidence level might be a better one to do here. So
Yes.
let's just give a confidence level, like, how you think, where you think it's trending with each of these kids. So let's start off on offense, Ryan.
Yep.
And I wrote an article this weekend on Carter Nelson and how important he is. But I'm going to say you need to get Carter Nelson. But the guy that I feel you need to kick this conversation off with is, in fact, Gearby Lambert, because that is a big need. You still need that big-time offensive lineman. You still need that pure tackle in this class. Gearby Lambert obviously is that guy. They're essentially in a position now, Ryan, where it's boom or bust. Your class is going to be defined by can you close on Gearby Lambert. So I know he just visited Ohio State this last weekend, Ryan.
Yep.
Where do you think things stand, and where do we believe things stand right now for Notre Dame as he comes out of, I think he's got Penn State coming up this weekend, just wrapped up Ohio State. Where do you see things standing, Ryan?
It's such a fascinating 2024 offensive tackle class nationally, Brian, because I feel like I keep watching kids wanting for them to impress me just in case Notre Dame has to pivot. But I just can't find a lot of guys that I really like that much, man. Gearby is the guy on the board for Notre Dame since the beginning, since Harry Hiestand was still the coach at Notre Dame, that you felt has about as much upside as any offensive tackle in the class. And Notre Dame's been in a good position, it seems like, for a long time. They were, especially with Harry Hiestand. Joe Rudolph, it seemed like it was a little disconnected there, maybe just kind of developing a relationship, but I feel like it's going back in a very good direction now. Obviously had a great visit at Notre Dame, a couple weekends ago. And I really think that for me, this is one where I feel good about where Notre Dame is here today. And I think that Gearby is a young man that, like most offensive linemen, don't really care about the recruiting process too much. Like, I just don't think he cares that much. Like, it's
his brand or being
Yes.
quoted in public, or he wants to play ball and go to school and play ball.
They're very different football players as far as style perspective, but it's very Charles Jagasaw-ish as far as like how I think they feel about this recruiting process. Like, he just wants his information. He wants to get, settled, and he wants to make a decision. So people always ask about timelines. It's just like, I think Gearby can make a decision anytime. Like, literally, like, it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be a month from now. There's an unknown there because I just don't think he really likes the recruiting process. He doesn't like to talk to people about his recruiting process for the most part. He doesn't like going on visits for the most part. He's just getting the data right now. So I think right now, as we stand today, Notre Dame is the favorite for Gearby Lambert. I think that ultimately you feel good about where they are and their ability to land. Obviously, a very talented offensive tackle out of Catholic Memorial in the state of Massachusetts. I like where Notre Dame is. I think they're the leader. Again, you have to outlast a couple of really good programs. Obviously, Ohio State this past weekend, Penn State, to your points. But I think Notre Dame has a chance to close on this one pretty quickly.
Everything I've heard, Ryan, coming out of the Ohio State visit is that Notre Dame still feels very good about their position for this one. So now, and Penn State to me, Ryan, is I just don't know if I'm not all that concerned about Penn State. I mean, they're kind of full at this point in time. I mean, they've already got, I believe, 5. Well, they had one kid, I believe, decommit recently.
Yes,
so I think they're maybe at 4 now.
And apparently Caleb Brewer might be playing defensive line for them.
Yeah, well, it's either from what I understand, it's either going to be him, or if they get Liam Andrews, then he's going to play the defensive line. He's going to be a defensive lineman. So we'll see how this all plays out. But I like where Notre Dame is at right now with this one, Ryan. Confidence level in this one, 1 to 10. So obviously 1 being the least confident, 10 being it's a done deal, essentially.
I am a very steady, like 8.5. Like, I don't want to quite throw it at 9 just because, again, like, this is one of those kids where I feel like it can just kind of happen at any time and things can get delayed even potentially. But like 8.5, I feel like Notre Dame's in a very good spot right now.
Ryan, we're going to talk a little bit about this more when Kingston, but I want to talk about the Notre Dame Ohio State angle here in a little bit. But I want to get to Kingston first. But we're going to first wrap up offense. And it is wild. Notre Dame has an outstanding offensive class right now, especially the skill positions. As we said, offensive line, there's a need left. There's no need per se. When we say need, we're talking numbers or positional fit.
Yep.
There's not a need at the skill position. From a numbers or fit standpoint, there is always a need to add more impact players And that's why Notre Dame is still recruiting Carter Nelson. He's not a need per se. He's a want, but it's a want because you're trying to build an offense that has the athleticism, the big playability to go out there and be elite and be championship caliber. Kid like this can help you. We know that Notre Dame made a big move last week, Ryan. We're now a week plus out of it. I think he went to Penn State this past weekend. He was scheduled to go to Penn State this past weekend.
Yep.
What's the latest with Carter Nelson and where Notre Dame stands and just kind of just where we are? We'll get to the confidence level at the end, but just kind of where's Notre Dame? You still feel as good as you did a week ago about where Notre Dame stands?
Yeah, things haven't really changed for me as far as the thoughts on Carter Nelson. I think that for me, and we're talking about the great tight end, obviously, out of Ainsworth, Nebraska, plays 8-man football out there, which is still pretty funny to me when you think about that. The Notre Dame's recruiting an 8-man football player, but University of Georgia is also recruiting that 8-man football player, and so is Alabama, and so is all these types of places. I feel like for me, there was an assumption that Nebraska was the heavy hitter kind of going into these official visits. Like you were going to keep him in state, and that was just going to kind of be the end of it. I mentioned after the visits that Nebraska is also actually probably a distant third in this conversation. This is a Notre Dame Georgia battle because Carter kind of wants to get away from home a little bit. Like that's just kind of where you are. Like this is one of those kids where he doesn't want to stay in the home state. I think that he wants to get out. So Notre Dame, Georgia. I thought that it was neck and neck coming out of the Notre Dame visit. You felt, and I still feel kind of relatively the same, Brian. Like this is one of those situations where I think Notre Dame is in a good spot. I think Georgia is still in a heavy contention. It's literally about every viewpoint for this one and who makes Carter feel as most at home. That was the best thing I heard about his visit last weekend was that it was just seamless with the other commits on campus. Like it just felt natural. He could see himself fitting at the University of Notre Dame. And it was a beautiful day, which didn't hurt after him being at the Boston College game this past season. So I think that it's a Notre Dame Georgia battle, excuse me. I think that one day you can convince me it's Notre Dame. One day you can convince me it's Georgia. The one thing that I think Notre Dame has an advantage of is that you only have one tight end that is committed in the class, and Jack Larson. Georgia already has 2 tight ends that are committed in the class. And I think that could go into Notre Dame's favor in the end.
Now, some people say, well, didn't Notre Dame just land a big-time tight end in 2025? Yes, but Georgia already has one too in Elias Williams. So that I don't think that's going to have an impact on it either.
Yep.
So, Ryan, what's your confidence level in Mr. Nelson end up picking Notre Dame? Or like I should say picking Notre Dame, but as things stand right now, what is your confidence level that they have it, that they're if he was to make a decision today, what would your confidence level be that he would pick Notre Dame?
That he would pick Notre Dame, I would say is about a 7 or an 8 right now. I feel good. I would probably lean more towards the 7 just because Georgia is obviously a tough contender and they're a team that you really have to go to the woodshed against and really, get down to the last step there. But I think that you have put yourself in a great position to land Carter Nelson. Like I think that Notre Dame is done about as well in this recruitment as they possibly could have. Like that's just how I feel about it. So I'll stick with the 7 at this point.
I'm only going 6, Ryan. I agree with everything you're saying. I think that the intel that we're getting from all of our sources is exactly your read, talking, to people that are close to Carter. It's just they got to prove to me that they can beat Georgia. That's really what it boils down to. So that's going to be it for me. That's why I'm at a 6. Yeah. I'll say this: I think Notre Dame is certainly surging.
Yes,
and you want to be there. Forget the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You want to be trending in the right direction, and they are certainly trending in the right direction for Carter Nelson. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, Ryan. We're going to talk about kids that have visited this spring or this summer, and we'll talk about Justin Scott at the very end. But let's talk about Kingston, Ryan. We've talked a lot about how the visit went. Notre Dame is trending, so we don't need to spend a lot of time there. I want to give your confidence level, and then I want to talk about something else related to Kingston and Gilby Lambert. So first, Ryan, you did a great job. Notre Dame's in a great position. You think that they're the leader. As of right now, what's your confidence level in Kingston Viliame? So if he were to pick today.
I feel like I'm all high on a few of these, man, but I think it's 8. I really do. I mean, Ohio State is a team that you can't just kind of shake your head at, right? Like they're a team that has James Laurinaitis obviously on the staff now that built a great relationship with him. They're a school that he has been high on for some time, but I really think coming out of this weekend, and again, this could change after Ohio State, we shall see, but I think that Notre Dame is the team to beat for Kingston Viliame. So I will go with an 8 because I just think that they have outlasted a little bit.
I'm going to go 7 simply because of this, and this is I want to transition into this. The only thing that's concerning me at all, about Gearby and Carter Nelson and Kingston is I think all the intel is great. It all sounds wonderful. I think Notre Dame is headed in the right direction with all 3 of them. But I would say that there's still a lot that Notre Dame has to prove to me, Ryan, in beating these schools. That's the big thing. But I also want to talk about the importance of, yes, they have to prove it. That's where some of my pause comes from. But also the importance of what it would mean for Notre Dame if this is sort of the we'll get Justin Scott later, but of the summer kids, there's like 4 right now that you look at and say, how many of those 4 kids you get this summer is going to go a long way towards defining your class. That's Carter Nelson, Gearby Lambert, Bronte Johnson, and obviously Kingston Viliama Asa. With 3 of those guys, you're battling either Ohio State or Georgia for them. Gearby and Kingston is Ohio State, and Georgia for Carter Nelson. This is going to be this staff's chance, Ryan, to really show that we're not just that school that cleans up and does great getting the guys you don't want. These are recruitments that to me go a long way towards saying, no, we can beat you for these schools. Now, I think Notre Dame has beaten more of these schools than people give them credit for in this class. And it's just some of these kids kind of committed early, or sometimes the school might say, hey, well, we weren't really on that guy. Yes, you were. Yeah, you were. Don't lie. But I think that Notre Dame has done a good job of beating those schools in certain instances. But like Sean Sevillano, right? Like Ohio State offered him, they recruited him. But I don't know if he was a guy that if he called up Ohio State the day before he committed Notre Dame and said, hey, I want to come, I don't know that he's a guy that they would have said, okay, sure, we'll take you right now. I if I'm being honest, I can't say that I believe that to be true.
Yep.
So that's kind of a thing that you look at in this situation. And now some people saying that somebody actually in the chat, one of our Ohio State fans just said, no, Notre Dame hasn't had a problem beating Ohio State in the past for offensive linemen. And I would say true when Coach Heastand was here.
Yeah.
That's why that one is a big opportunity for Joe Rudolph. It's a huge opportunity for the defensive staff to go out and say, hey, look, we took 2 top 100 players that we went toe-to-toe with Ohio State with, and we won them. I think that's almost as important as the actual talent that they would be getting in those players. It's never as important as the talent, right? The talent is always the primary. But I think that's important for Notre Dame to be able to do that, Ryan. It's huge. And then, of course, if you can beat Georgia for a big-time tight end that they want, that says, okay, we're still tight end you. That's the signal that says, Ryan. So I think that's a big part of these recruitments for those guys.
Well, I think Ohio State's a really important one, Brian, because I remember in the 2023 class, I felt like Notre Dame had beaten Michigan for so many different recruits, right? Like just in that cycle. Ohio State is one where, yeah, Notre Dame's had some wins, but there's also been a lot of losses, obviously. Like, let's call it what it is. So I think that you need
lot more losses than wins in recent years.
Yes, 100%. And I think that for me, we always talk about this. In order for Notre Dame to get to the top of college football, you have to become the power in the Midwest at some point, right? Like you can't just meander along, be solid in the Midwest, and then expect to be the best team in college football. Like you need to dominate the Midwest. You need to be able to become what Ohio State has been in recent years for the most part. A team that is contending for playoffs every single year, that is a threat. That last year, if a couple things go differently in that Georgia game, maybe Ohio State's national champions. Like that's kind of where you are with that type of conversation, right? So I think that Notre Dame has to unseat Ohio State as the class of the Midwest at some point, and it starts on the recruiting trail.
Yeah,
it obviously ends on the field, but it starts with acquisition of talent. It starts with getting those guys that are going to win on Saturdays, and that's huge for me. It's absolutely huge.
So, Ryan, when you look at it, we talk about gap closing, and we've explained gap closing in 2 regards. One is obviously you're getting talent that makes you better, and then the other one is getting guys that really take a big jump towards closing the gap. And there's twofold aspects of that. One is how it impacts you, but the other part is, are you taking away a talent that would have otherwise gone to this school that you're chasing? And the fact of the matter is, when you look at the last 10 years, there's a lot of talk about, Michigan's better than – no, they're not. They're hot now, but I do not view Michigan as a better program the last 5-6 years than Notre Dame. But they're trending that direction, and Notre Dame needs to make sure that they don't fade back and let Michigan chase them. Penn State's not that team yet, but again, they're nipping on Notre Dame's heels in my opinion. But Notre Dame has to be looking forward. And to your point, Ryan, I think it's a great point, and it's even more true because they're on your schedule now. For this season, you can't be the best team in the nation when you're not even in the best team in the North,
right?
And a team that borders your state has dominated you on the field. Right? Wins in 2005, in the Fiesta Bowl, win in 2015 in the Fiesta Bowl, and they beat you last year. I don't buy it though. They haven't beat them since they only played like 5 times since the 1930s. So spare me with that whole, but looking at in recent history, Ohio State has dominated this series. And it's not even like you could say any of those games where, gee, if you could make a play here or play there, you're winning that game. Maybe if Zibikowski's fumble doesn't get called back, maybe they've got a shot to win that one, maybe. But that's all the way back in 2005. Right. You weren't competitive in 2015, and you were competitive for a while last year. But when it came to money time, Ohio State's guys made plays, and Notre Dame's guys didn't make plays. It's as simple as that. And of course, as you said, they've pretty much beat Notre Dame for a much larger chunk of recruits than Notre Dame's beaten them for, although Notre Dame has had some wins. And so, to me, closing the gap is about getting these kind of guys, and they're big-time top 100 guys. And they're big top 100 guys at positions where this is not a great year nationally, in my opinion. So to me, it's very big. It's very big to win those recruitments. Same with the Georgia one, in my opinion. So I think those are going to be very significant recruitments. I'm all for finding sleeper kids, like somebody in the. I'm not sold on Cole Mullins because the SEC didn't offer him. I don't care. Don't care. I know what the film tells me. Right. And the film tells me this kid's a dude. And those are great recruitments to have. But at some point in time, if you want to be that team, you've got to be able to go toe to toe with the big boys. And I feel the way Notre Dame needs to recruit is not the way Ohio State has recruited, or Georgia or Alabama, where they're getting top 2-3 classes. You got to recruit like Clemson. You're getting like 5 to 9 classes, and you're getting those Isaiah Simmons, and you're doing a great job of evaluating those players, the Travis Etiennes and the guys like that. But the one thing Clemson still did, Ryan, is they still got their Deshaun Watsons, their Trevor Lawrences, their Dexter Lawrences, their T. Higginses, their A.J. Terrells, right? And Notre Dame still has to get those kind of guys as well as the high upside guys that we see, right? Those are very important, and that's what these guys are, and that's what they signify. And those are things that can be momentum builders for you when you talk about, okay, you got something a little special to sell to Justin Scott now. You've got something a little special to sell to the 25 kids that you're battling those schools for. Like, hey, man, we're doing something over here. Come be a part of that. And then if you can somehow get that W on the field, you've got an opportunity, Ryan, here over the next 3 months to talk about closing the gap, to majorly close the gap on Ohio State on and off the field. And that's what these recruitments are very, 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 very important part of. Let's get back on track, Ryan. Let's stay at linebacker for a second and talk about Bradley Shaw. What's the latest with where things stand with Bradley Shaw as Notre Dame looks to close out this class?
I think Notre Dame's done a tremendous job with Bradley Shaw, because this is a weird one, Brian, where it's sense of, who the top linebacker on the board is. Like, there's never been a question that Kingston's the top guy, but they've still managed, in my opinion, to make waves with a guy like a Bradley Shaw. So if it ends up that they miss on Kingston Viliamuasa, I believe that Notre Dame will have a tremendous opportunity to get Bradley Shaw. He's a young man that I was told that Auburn was a big team for him. Alabama actually isn't really in the conversation as far as being the team to beat for a Bradley Shaw. Georgia is a team that actually likes Bradley Shaw a lot. So you're fighting against the Auburns, you're fighting against Georgia's. And I think that Notre Dame would have a good chance to win that one, because his parents and him are very high academic kids out of Hoover, Alabama. Like, they have been now to Notre Dame twice, including an official visit 2 weekends ago, where I believe that they did, again, did a tremendous job. Because what happened was Bradley Shaw came to campus, and it was a little bit of a different vibe of a recruitment. Usually all the guys are just together, right? And they're, taking in the sites, and they're doing all their things. They had Bradley and his parents kind of in their own type of environment that really kind of dig deep and have their meetings one-on-one and do all that type of stuff. So I think that they're hitting good chords with Bradley Shaw after that visit. And I think Notre Dame would have a tremendous job to outbeat a Auburn and a Georgia. It's just about how the linebacker board falls ultimately, if that will happen or not.
When I look at Bradley Shaw, Ryan, it just comes back to this. You have to bet. I can see why Georgia likes him. I do. I can see why Alabama doesn't. Alabama is still a traits-driven team, and that's fine. It's worked for them. Kirby has been a guy more willing to take a chance on a guy that fits film-wise, and Bradley Shaw fits. I mean, he's a Nakobe Dean type of guy, undersized. I would even argue coming out of high school, he's a little bit more athletic than Nakobe Dean. Now, I don't know if he's the player Nakobe Dean was, right? Because Nakobe Dean wasn't a great player because of his athleticism or his size. It was because he had it here and he had it here, right? I mean, that's why he was a really good player. So I get it. I do get it. And again, I love the film. It's just about the body. That's the only question mark. Now, I do believe this based on talking to some different sources, Ryan. I do believe that if Bradley Shaw wanted to commit like tomorrow, that they would take him and still say, hey, Kingston's still our dude. Nothing changes that. What I don't know is if and this isn't saying it wouldn't happen. This is an uncertainty on my end. I don't have an answer to this. Is what if Kingston commits tomorrow? Not going to happen. Would they then still take Bradley Shaw? That I don't have an answer for.
Great question.
But they do like Bradley Shaw a lot. And I know that a lot of us are going to view Bradley Shaw as a backup option and type of player. I don't think that's how Notre Dame views it, right or wrong. I don't think that's how they view it. I think they really like this kid.
I like him too.
And his film is great. We've said this all along. His film is great. The question you have is, can his body hold up?
Yeah.
And does he have the frame? He can run. I'd say he's more athletic than, like I said, than a Nakobe Dean. He can run. He can move. It's just he's a rover body in a middle linebacker game. You know what I mean? And that's
6 foot, 210 pounds probably right now. Yeah, I mean, to your point. I'll say this, Brian. A lot of skepticism over linebacker recruiting. If you end up getting Kingston Viliamu-Asa and you take Bradley Shaw as well, that's a dang good linebacker group, man.
Because you know what it is, Ryan? I think there's actually merit to that argument, in my opinion. Yes, the 25 class is loaded. If you get those kids and you take them, it is what it is. But two of your linebackers in the great 22 class are already defensive line. You have Jalen Sneed and Nolan Ziegler. There's no guarantee that if Jalen Sneed breaks out the next 2 years, that he's even be in the team in 2025 when that class shows up.
It's so weird to think.
You know, I mean, like, think about it. When I say on the team, I'm talking about if Jalen, let's say Jalen comes out this year and has a breakout year and then goes out in 2024 and just rips it up and has a 90 tackles, 100 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4 or 5 sacks. When I mean not on the team anymore, I mean NFL, going to the NFL.
A good thing. That's a good reason to be. Yeah.
Not transferring. I'm talking about going to the NFL. And then, of course, last year's 3-man class. So you have 5 guys for 2 years. I could see a potential, and we've always also talked about this. It's not a lock that Preston Zinter stays at linebacker. What if there's injuries at tight end? He needs to move to tight end, H-back. I mean, he could move to Viper. I mean, there's a lot of things. What if there's an injury? I still don't know if I would necessarily say, like, I don't think they need it numbers-wise. I think they would look at it and say, hey, we have a chance to load up here. It's a position where it would make sense, and so we can do it. I could see them doing that, Ryan. I could see them kind of convincing themselves that that's a smart play and then just see what you can do in 2025. Because here's what's crazy. When the 25 class shows up, Nolan Ziegler, Jalen Sneed will be seniors.
Crazy.
All right, 22, 23, 24, 20. Yeah, they'll be seniors. So it's a really weird deal. It's a really weird deal. I want to respond to something along this lines too, Bradley Shaw, that we get asked a lot is, how is Shaw different from Osbury physically and from an athletic standpoint? I would argue Shaw's a little bit more cut up. They're very similar body type wise. Here's the big difference. Jaden Osbury is a guy that is a rangy, athletic, play in space guy. Bradley Shaw is an inside linebacker.
He's downhill.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
He is a downhill inside linebacker.
Very explosive downhill, but to your point. Yes.
Very.
Yep.
And so that's why the body, because that's a very fair question. People keep hearing us talk about, does he have the frame? And then we're talking about how, Jaden Osbury is a Rover Will type of guy. This is more of a guy that you see as a Mike type of linebacker. And that's the question mark. That's where it kind of comes from. It's if he was a Rover Will type of guy and he moved like Jaden Osbury, no problem. No problem
Yeah.
looking at him. But it's more of he has that frame that Jaden has, very similar frame, Ryan, a little bit more definition, but it's just he's a box guy. And that's the difference for me when I look at the two.
If anybody wants some fun, though, go put on Bradley Shaw's huddle tape, man, because he is a ferocious hitter, man. He lays some wood. And, I mean, getting a kid out of Hoover, Alabama wouldn't be the worst thing in the world either, right?
It's the same thing like Deuce Knight, right? Like there's a lot of merit to trying to get kids out of Louisiana like Jaden Alsbury and trying to get kids out of Alabama because you open up that pipeline a little bit. What if Bradley comes to college and the size isn't a limiting factor for him?
He's a stud. Right.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden it's like, hey man, like you can come up here and go to the NFL or be a great player too. So they do like him a lot. It's just we're going to see how the timing is going to be very interesting on how these all play out. So what would you say if he was to decide today, Ryan? What would your confidence level be on Bradley Shaw?
It'd be relatively high. I think that it would be a little lower than a couple of the guys just because I think that there's a couple teams that are still in the conversation. For most of them, it's 1-1, right? It's like Notre Dame versus Georgia, this team versus another team. For this one, it's a three-way kind of battle. So I would probably say a 5 or a 6. It's still pretty good considering it's just about, again, like you're fighting against a couple SEC programs. One that is, I mean, Georgia's done a really good job of cranking out NFL players on the linebacker position over the last couple of years. So I would say it's 5 or 6 because I think that Bradley really does like Notre Dame. It's just a three-way battle comparative to a one-off versus another team.
Yeah. What's funny is the perception of Bradley Shaw with Notre Dame fans is very interesting. It's very interesting.
A lot of people don't like him, man. Where I'm like, he has the rankings, he has the offers. Like
Ryan, he's a consensus 4-star recruit that 247 has ranked number 61 in the country. He's ranked in the top 250 by ESPN On 3 247 Sports. He's got a Georgia offer and Alabama offer. And people are like, I don't like this guy. And I think part of that might be my fault, to be completely honest with you, because I kind of picked apart the parts of his game early on that I'm just like, I don't like this.
That's your job as an analyst, though. Yeah.
But I didn't focus enough on this kid's film is really good. And so that's why I'm trying to do more of that lately, is to say, hey, look, here's my concerns have not changed. There's no spin that now that Notre Dame might get him, all of a sudden, I didn't realize he grew 4 inches. I love him. He's a top 20 guy. Look, the concerns are still there. But you can't discount the fact that this kid can play football. And if J.D. Bertrand can come be a 3-year starter and we praise him as a player, then there's no reason Bradley Shaw can't be that guy. Right. It's just he doesn't move the needle the way that Kingston does. But I'm not going to lie to you. If Notre Dame wanted to take him, Ryan, I'd have a hard time saying no because and this is what we get down to with the way Clemson recruited and the way Kirby built his first title team. Yes, there was the 5-star guys and all that stuff, but there was a lot of guys, several important guys that they had that weren't that type of player. We talked about Nakobe Dean. Let's be real about this, Ryan. If Nakobe Dean plays at Kentucky and not Georgia, he's not a 3rd-round draft pick, in my opinion. He's not. He wasn't that type of athlete. He got drafted higher because he's at Georgia, because they would have picked apart all the different parts of it. He's not big enough. He ran a 4.7, all these type of things. He'd have got drafted lower. Being at Georgia helped him, but this is a similar type of guy, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well,
and J.D. Bertrand, guys like that, guys that you and I like. I know some Notre Dame fans, they just still have this. They don't like J.D. Bertrand. He could have 120 tackles this year. Notre Dame's going to win a title, and some dude on here is going to say he should have been benched for so and so. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But the kid can play football.
Yes. Well, and I think that for me too, Brian, like linebackers changed it a little bit nowadays too, man. Like, I've always want length personally, but you're seeing more and more guys in the mold of Nakobe Dean, Devin White, Devin Bush. There's a lot more 6 foot and shorter backers nowadays.
And there's a time and place to say, hey, look, I know that he doesn't fit this box of measurables we've looked at, but the fact is the kid can play. Yes, Ray Holcraft has a great, he says, Bradley Shaw is a watch the film guy. Yes. And we need a guy like that. That's what he says. And I agree. So let's get back on track here, Ryan. Let's go to the secondary.
Yep.
I'll see Bronte Johnson. This has been a very interesting recruitment, Ryan, and it's been on and off again based on certain things. But here's the thing I love about this kid. They said, if you want to be here, you've got to do this, this, and this. And he did this, this, and this, and some of that. And so now he's in a position where he's going to make his decision on Saturday, Ryan.
Yep.
Notre Dame has done a great job. We all know that Notre Dame is in a great position. What is your confidence? Where do things stand with Bronte right now, and what's your confidence level?
I think that that's a great note, Brian, is that, like, can we give a shout out to Bronte Johnson? I mean,
Yes.
like, he worked his butt off, man. Like, he did. I mean, shout out to the kid, because he was not in a position where this was potentially going to be possible, but he put his head down and he worked. There's no doubt. So today it's a 9, right? Like, that's the confidence level, is that it can't go much higher than where I am right now. I mean, it is a school, one, that Bronte knows a lot about. He's an Indiana kid. He knows the University of Notre Dame, and he wants to be at the University of Notre Dame. And I think that you're in a good position there, obviously. I think the only question, maybe from Bronte's perspective, outside of just figuring out the academic piece, is some schools like him at wide receiver, some like him at safety. Where would you rather play in college
Right.
football? Like, that's a big thing, right? And
And
obviously Notre Dame's sole division of the safety.
And early on, he was a guy that kind of wanted to play wide receiver. I mean, he's a 1,000-yard receiver from last year, Ryan. And if he wanted to play receiver, I'd take him at wide receiver. I personally think he's more natural playing defense. And I saw this at last year's Irish Invasion, and I thought here's a couple things I liked about Bronte. Why I was really sold on him last year is I like kids that compete. And there's a receiver that's at Notre Dame right now, won't name him, but I remember when he was at Irish Invasion, and you're looking at him, and you're like, this kid just oozes talent. This kid is incredibly talented. But he just was kind of always in the back of the line, and he was just always kind of, not a guy that was necessarily looking to, boy, I want to just jump in there and take another rep and compete. And the thing I liked about Bronte is last year when he was going through the recruiting process, Ryan, or excuse me, the camp process at Notre Dame, he would go out there, take a rep at receiver, and then immediately jump into DB and take a rep at DB. He wanted to compete. And I loved that. But at that camp, what I saw is a kid that has the length and the speed and all that, a receiver, catches the ball okay. But when you put him back there at safety, there just was an ease of movement that you're just like, okay, this kid is a natural on defense. I mean, he's got a lot to learn. There's film of him as a sophomore. There's a clip where he's standing there at free safety looking to the sideline. He's got his hands on his hips. I think he's like waiting on the call to be made. And then he quickly sees the ball snapped and he takes off and like tackles the guy 2 yards downfield. You know what I mean? It's like this kid can move. And he's really skinny, but he will hit you.
Yes.
He's not afraid to hit. So, but you gotta praise a kid like this to say, you want to be here, you need to do this. He had a lot of things stacked up against him, but he said, nope, none of those are going to be excuses for me. I'm going to get the work done. And if Notre Dame's able to close on him, it would be a huge pickup. But we can't, and this is not meant at all to be disrespectful to Chris O'Leary at all. But if Bronte Johnson ends up at Notre Dame, the person primarily responsible for that is Bronte Johnson. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And so huge props to the kid if that's the direction that this thing goes. And he'll announce Saturday. We'll have a show around the time, and we'll discuss what it means for Notre Dame when that happens.
Yeah.
So I don't like Ryan. I think you nailed it. I don't know that I could have a higher confidence level for a recruit on the board right now than where I stand with Bronte Johnson. Malcolm Ziegler, Ryan, you wrapped up his recruitment earlier. We need to dive into where things stand. We know what's your confidence level right now with where things stand with Malcolm Ziegler.
It would probably be a 5. I mean, like, it's not bad. It's not low per se. It's just, again, you've put yourself into the top group for a Malcolm Ziegler after the visit that you had this past weekend. It's just about making up ground. And he was offered just last month. He's only been on the radar for a couple months. And to be able to to be able to beat out schools like South Carolina and Clemson and North Carolina and schools that have just been on him for a lot longer, that's a difficult task. It is. So I'll still say 5 because I think there's a fighter's chance for Malcolm Ziegler. I just think that you may have gotten in a little bit too late. Like, that's just kind of where I feel like with this one. So you'll have to defeat some teams that have just built a much deeper relationship with them. It's possible, but I just don't think that I can look at it and say that I feel like Notre Dame has the upper hand here. You're still playing from the back a little bit, in my opinion.
I'm with you on a 5. I'm comfortable with that. That's where I'm at. And then the last one, Ryan, that we're going to talk about of the guys that we think are going to be making summer decisions and summer visitors is Tabron Benny Powell. Yep. Where do things stand with him, and what's your confidence level?
So he obviously is the young man that was at the evaluation camp last week and got the staff had been doing their homework on him before he came to campus. And he did well enough that they thought that he deserved an offer, obviously. And he's a player that plays, obviously, at Ben Minnick's high school out there in the state of Ohio. A young man that is listed 6'1", 170 pounds. If you pop on his film, he's playing more of an outside linebacker rover role than he is a true safety spot. But the anticipation is that in 2023, he is going to be playing more on the back end now that Ben is obviously at Notre Dame and Malik Hartford is at Ohio State. So we shall see. He's a wait and see player as far as just how good of a player he is. I have my reservations, obviously, but I think as of right now, Notre Dame is obviously the team to beat. It's the biggest offer. He's a player. It's a team that has been open and has been honest with him and is pushing for him, obviously now. So it would also be a 9. You can't feel much higher than this one because that's a school that is familiar, and I think that's going to be making a strong push.
Yeah. Last one, Ryan.
Yes.
Justin Scott. Where do things stand? I've talked a lot about him the last week while you were out.
Yeah.
Let's share your thoughts, and then we'll get into confidence later. Just kind of share your thoughts on where you see this recruitment being right now.
It's about the same as it was last time I was asked this one, Brian, is that like I'm at like a 4 right now. And it's not like an insurmountable 4. It's a 4 that could turn into an 8 very quickly, depending on how things go. It's just we know that Justin Scott was ready to commit to the University of Notre Dame earlier this year. We know it was going to happen. And the further you get away from that, the worse I feel about it. Just kind of where it is, man. I still think he likes Notre Dame. I still think Notre Dame has a chance. I still think that they can make a strong push. I think it's still possible. But until he gets back on campus, it's going to stay low to me, right? Yeah. There's no reason that there can't be a summer visit that happens at the University of Notre Dame. There's no reason that we have to wait until the fall for an official visit for a game day. You could do both. There's unlimited official visits now. You could do both. Yeah. So until he gets back on campus, it's going to stay at a 4. I'm in prove it mode, show me mode, whatever you want to call it. Justin, you got to get back to campus, man. And Notre Dame needs to get back to campus if there's a true just where I am, man. I just can't. I just don't feel good about it unless they can get him back to campus, and I don't know if that's going to happen.
Here's where I'm at, Ryan. This is what I've said to people. If I was gonna get a confidence level that he's going to commit to Notre Dame this summer, it's a 3, maybe a 2. What I have said is, but I just feel like when we get to December, it's going to be a different story. I just feel like he's going to commit to a Southern school this summer, and I feel like he's going to sign with a Northern school. And I think that Northern school would be Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is going to be the team to be in that situation. And there's a lot of reasons why. But I'll say this. I think the best thing to happen for Notre Dame, and I said this last week, Ryan, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I think the best thing to happen to Notre Dame this summer was Georgia knocking his socks off last week during the official visit. Okay. That's the one thing that might cause him to not commit this summer. Because I don't think he's at a place where he's definitely going to commit this summer. If he does, I think it's Miami. I'm actually, if we were doing a Miami show right now, I'd say my confidence level they'd commit to Miami if he committed today is like 8. Like I think they're the clear number 1 right now. Yeah. I just don't know that. I think Georgia did enough, and I think Notre Dame has done enough to where there's at least a chance he doesn't commit this summer. If he goes into the fall uncommitted, I've said this, my confidence level raises even more because then he will make a visit. There's no doubt. Does him not committing this summer change things? I know he's got a set of vision. I get all that. We've established that. But does that raise your confidence level at all if we get out of July and get into August and he's uncommitted at that point in time?
Not really, just because I guess I'm just hesitant if he's actually going to take a visit in the fall, Brian. I mean, like, I would love to say that I'm just like super.
He hasn't set a date, but just so people know, he has told Notre Dame he's coming, and and he's told people around him that he's going to do it. I know that a date hasn't been set, and that's all fair. Yeah, but he has said it. At least he's been adamant that it's going to happen. I'd be shocked if it's not going to be the Ohio State weekend. And just because he hasn't announced it doesn't mean that that's not the plan as of right now. That's my understanding of where things are going to be.
That's all fair. And I could be completely fine and off base on it. It's just saying, oh, I'm going to take one in the fall eerily feels like to me of like, I just don't want to tell you no yet, but I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
no at some point. And I just can't
Yeah.
shake that feeling.
I'll be honest, I felt that way for a long time, Ryan.
Yeah.
I think now he's not. He's been more honest with Notre Dame about that they're not there for him. And I think that they realize that from my understanding, if he commits, there's the expectation is that he still plans on visiting Notre Dame this fall. And he's going to visit other schools this fall too. It's not like he's only going to visit Notre Dame. I think he's going to make multiple fall visits this year. All of this is we'll see what happens. And do you trust Justin Scott or not? Up to this point in time, I can't say that he's necessarily done anything to make me think that he's a dishonest kid, right? And the only hesitation that I would even have about that is more of just what happened last year with other people, not so much anything with Justin.
That's fair.
And so that would be kind of my thing. But I think right now, if we're going to talk about a summer commitment, it's not going to be Notre Dame. It's not going to be Notre Dame. Now, could he make a visit in July? It's different. I think there are periods in July that are shut, but there are also some periods in July, I believe, where he could come if he wanted to. If I'm Notre Dame, I'm trying to get him on campus for one of those periods. I really would. So, Ryan, that's kind of the hot board where we are right now. We're going to dive into the mailbag next. But, folks, before we get to the mailbag, and we've got about 20 questions in here. If you have some more questions, let's go and throw them in there, and we'll answer those. But we've got some good ones here so far, Ryan. But before we get to the mailbag, folks, do us a favor: hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. Sign up for our premium message board. If you're not a message board person, but you've been wanting ways to support Irish Breakdown, that's a way to do it. Sign up for the message board. And then I'm going to have a post coming out later today. I've had some people ask, hey, how are different ways we can support Irish Breakdown? So I'm going to have a post on the message board just kind of showing all the ways that you can support us financially, whether it's you directly giving us financial support or if there are things that you can do that then lead to financial support coming from other people. So we'll give you some of that as well. So make sure you check that out. We're going to have that up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So Ryan, it is mailbag time. And let's have some fun here today with the mailbag. But we're going to start off with a couple super chats. We have one from Rob Osgood. Rob says, guys, thank you for what you do. Rob, thank you for what you do. The fact that you're here every day, we greatly appreciate it. And you're welcome. And we'll continue to try to keep doing what we do, Ryan.
Sir.
Kirk D.A. Anderson Fitness says, I rarely catch you guys live since I'm busy working. Keep up the great work. We will do that, Kirk. Thank you for your support, buddy. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your super chat, obviously. Here's something that people may not know, but we actually are now eligible for something called a super thanks. So if you're listening to this show right now and you've wanted to support us financially by giving us money through a super chat, that type of situation, there's a super thanks that you can give. I would say that there's better ways to do it, but if that's the avenue you want to go forward, that we would greatly appreciate that as well. But Kirk, watching our show, even if it's not live, if you go back and watch our shows later, we still get ad revenue from that. So that's absolutely encouraged. And one of the things that I'll do in the message board post that I make is kind of rank what are the best, kind of go through it and rank. So people have asked, is it better to watch the show if I didn't see the show live? Is it better to watch it on YouTube or other platforms? I'll answer that question because one platform pays a lot better than another, and we'll dive into that there as well. But Kirk, I really appreciate it, man, especially for the people that can't watch live and still support us. We greatly appreciate that. I'm just going to throw this up because it is a super chat. Terry Jewelry says, Brian and Ryan, how many reps at 225 can you hit?
Right now? Are you asking me right now?
I don't care. I have no
2?
idea.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I could probably do. I think the best I could probably do is like 7 or 8 in my
Like now?
heyday, right? Like
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe
yeah.
2.
Most I ever did was like 12. I was a quarterback, man. I didn't care about benching.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, Jordan Schreiber says, how was Father's Day, Ryan? Did you get a nice meal prepared for you?
I did, Jordan. We actually went to my in-laws last night and they smoked some steak, some sirloin steak. They smoked some chicken. I had some mac and cheese, which was absolutely fantastic. Had some potatoes. So yeah, man, I was eating like a king last night, which was very nice. Very, very nice.
Gotta love that. Love that.
Man, smoked steak. It's a life changer, man.
We kind of hung out a little bit last night. I'm not a father, so we didn't really have a Father's Day deal. But I did make something on Saturday, and I made 2 of them. One I had on Saturday, one I had last night. But I made a stuffed chicken breast, and I stuffed it with mushrooms and mozzarella. And it was really, really good. I enjoyed that very much. So part of my clean eating, a little cleaner eating than I have in the past. So pray for me, everybody. I am on a no more fast food meal plan, and it's
Nice.
painful with how busy my schedule is. Sometimes it's just really easy to just be able to quickly go online, order something, and have it delivered. But
Yes.
not doing that anymore. So yeah, it's gonna be tough. Gonna be tough. But
Times are tough working from home,
yeah.
man. Times are tough.
Yep, and little one's doing okay, Ryan? Obviously,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
good,
She's doing all
good.
right at the
Very,
moment.
very good.
Yeah. Got the both the girls are home today because my daughter's
Oh,
daycare is off for Juneteenth. So
gotcha,
yeah.
gotcha.
Yep.
All right, now that explains why you are
Yes.
at the second office. The
Oh
second
yes.
office.
Unless you wanted Juliet and Raina to be on in the background,
No,
she's not to
no,
be a
we're
great
good.
show.
This is
Yeah.
perfect. It's good. It's good. It's good. We've got a question from Inside the Horseshoe podcast. Hey guys, I was just curious if you'd heard anything about how Gearby Lambert's visit at Ohio State went. Hopefully Notre Dame still leads. We talked about this earlier in the show, and visit went well. I mean, it was a good visit. I don't know that I've ever heard of anyone going to Ohio State not enjoying themselves at Ohio State, right? I mean, it's a
Sure.
fun campus. What we have said coming out of it, Ryan, is that we still feel Notre Dame is in the best position as of right now to land
Yep.
him. So
Agree.
here's one, Ryan, from Irish Blooded. Happened to rewatch the 30 for 30 Catholics versus Convicts this weekend, which is great, by the way. What is a 30 for 30 for Notre Dame you would like to see done for an event in your lifetime?
That's funny, Irish blooded. I actually watched the Catholics vs Convicts again this weekend because it was on. So yeah, a event that happened
Could be
in
an
my
event, a
life,
season, something, yeah, something like that.
man. A lot of them are painful, which is
Yeah,
not good. I was thinking the Bush push, and I was thinking 2012. Like they're both
yeah.
kind of painful though.
That
But it
USC game would be
yeah,
painful, but that would be a great 30 for 30.
it would be a
It
great 30
would.
for 30. Yeah,
Well, I
it
would
would
love
be.
to see a 30 for 30 on the Notre Dame USC rivalry, just in general. Like, because here's why rivalries that are intriguing, Ryan, are ones that to me have an interesting backstory on why they became the type of rivalry they became. And the Notre Dame USC rivalry is so unique because it's not Ohio State and Michigan. They border each other. It's in-state
Right.
schools like Carolina and Duke. Those are easy, right?
Yep.
This one is like, how is a team from South Bend, Indiana, rivals with a team from Los Angeles? And I think the story is great. I think all the lead up to it about how, during that time when a lot of schools were not willing to play Notre Dame, I think it was Howard Jones, I think was the coach at USC at the time, was like, hey, we'll play you. And how USC, I mean, USC's, as long as I have been a college football fan and then studying their history, they've never been a team afraid to go anywhere and play anybody. And I've always respected, even during Pete's tenure. I mean, they played Auburn and Virginia Tech and some very good schools. And of course, they always have Notre Dame on their schedule. I think that would be a fascinating story. I think the 30 for 30 for the 88 team would be a fascinating one because there were some great storylines, some great characters on those teams, and you've got the Rocket and the Tony Rice angle, which we've seen talked about in some of the shows and different things like that. I think that 88 team being discussed would be a really fascinating one. That would be a good 30 for 30.
I hope that there's a 30 for 30 someday on the rise of Notre Dame football under Marcus Freeman.
I know,
But that
right?
one is to
Yeah.
be written. That is to be
Yeah.
written.
Well, and then the other one too, Ryan, is I think it would be and I don't think ESPN would ever have the stones to do it, but it would be a very interesting story about the Notre Dame and the Big Ten, about why Notre Dame never joined the Big Ten. Because most Big Ten fans think that Notre Dame, you think you're too good for the Big Ten and blah, blah. No, that's not the history. Notre Dame tried for 40 years to get into the Big Ten. And why the Big Ten kept saying no and do that backstory. And then why has Notre Dame been the ones to say no recently?
Yeah.
And so I think that, and then how the Big Ten keeping Notre Dame out is what forced Notre Dame to become the national program that they became. So I think that would be a fascinating 30 for 30 and a very eye-opening one for a lot of people. There's a huge misunderstanding that people that aren't Notre Dame fans have about why Notre Dame is independent, has remained independent, and has been so anti going to the Big Ten. There's a huge misconception about why that is. And amongst some Notre Dame fans, especially younger Notre Dame fans, especially amongst younger Notre Dame fans, right? where they don't understand why. Because there's a lot of fans, yourself included, you don't know a time when Notre Dame wasn't part of a TV contract. I believe it's been that case your whole life.
Yeah.
I think they signed the deal like 91, 92, and you were born
91.
91. So your entire life, it's, oh yeah, you got your TV deal. Well, older folks, even older than me, understand like, no, Notre Dame had to earn that right. And here's how it went down. I think that would be a fascinating 30 for 30. Fascinating 30 for 30. That would be great.
I like Ed's idea in the chat, by the way, of a 30 for 30.
What did he say? I didn't see that one.
I like to see a 30 for 30 on Brian Kelly's best chip shots on the golf course.
Yeah. Hard pass. Hard pass on that one. So that's those are things, Ryan, that would be, I think, interesting storylines. But I do like yours.
Push.
Yeah. Yep. No, I mean, the one that hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like they've done so many specials on like the Manti Te'o situation and everything, but it would be kind of cool to see the 2012 season in general, and maybe just leave out the Alabama game. But
I will say this. I will make this guarantee. If Notre Dame wins a national championship under Marcus Freeman, there will absolutely be some sort of big story on it, because his story is is interesting. Notre Dame's rise to that level again. But you know that there still has never been a black head coach to win a national championship in college football.
It's wild, man.
We've seen it now. Division I. There's been it, like Eddie Robinson has some at his level, and there's been some at smaller schools, I believe, but not at like Division I football. There's never been a black head coach to win a championship.
It's crazy,
and that'd be a huge storyline. It rightfully so. So, and would kick down a lot of barriers. So I think that would make it, if they did win under him, that angle. There's so many different angles to what that story would mean. Notre Dame hasn't won a title in 30 some years. There's that storyline in it. And that to me is what makes a great story. It's not just about the game or this, it's the backstory that led into it. Like, for example, part of what made that 2006 Michigan Ohio State game a story to last a lifetime was not just 1 versus 2, not just being a great game. It was the fact that Bo Schembechler died the week before that happened. That added to the whole thing, the whole mystique of the game. The Notre Dame Miami game, the mystique of that, and the rivalry, but also the backstory about why that game mattered, why the U rivalry with Notre Dame mattered. So I think that, to me, and the storylines on a Notre Dame team that won a championship would be fascinating. And there's so many different angles that could go with that, Ryan. So I think that you are correct in that regard. Like, let's say they won it this year. There's the Sam Hartman angle. There's the Marcus Freeman angle. There's Notre Dame hasn't won in 30 plus years. All those different type of things are very fascinating. And I'll say this because I think today is an appropriate day to say this. I would love to see somebody do a story on a 30 for 30 on Father Ted. I think that'd be a very fascinating. Well, it doesn't have to be a 30 for 30, but at least something very interesting because of not just his role in helping Notre Dame rise as an athletic program, but also his role in the civil rights movement was very, very deep and thorough. And you go back to Notre Dame, like when the KKK came to town, and the student athletes and the student body, went and said, "Nah, not here. This ain't happening here," and had that big brawl. So there'd be so many great potential storylines. I wish they would do more stuff like that. I wish Notre Dame would do more stuff like that. Like, that's the thing, is the way it is now, Ryan. Why can't you put that out?
Right.
Like, that would be pretty cool. I'd be a big fan of that. That'd be awesome. It'd be very awesome. All right, let's get down here and some more questions, Ryan. So I like that one, Irish Blooded. I like that one. Got John 88. If you guys are freaking awesome. Thank you, John. We all appreciate each and every one of you that put in the effort day in and day out to give us the latest with Notre Dame football. Cannot thank you all enough. Well, I appreciate it. And here's how you can thank us. Just keep showing up, buddy, and keep being a part of what we're doing. I really, really appreciate that. Really appreciate that very much. We've got one here from Domer Grizz. How often do unknown players take big leaps in senior year of high school? Does Notre Dame keep any spots open for new under-the-radar recruits to pop up, or do they have to fill up early for some reason?
I feel like to the first question, Domer Grizz, I feel like it happens almost every year that we at least get one kid that's like, I didn't really know who that kid was, and then all of a sudden he's a stud. I mean, Brandon Hillman's the easy one, obviously, for Notre Dame fans last year, where, I mean, he was a quarterback recruit that had a scholarship offer from Morehead State, and that was kind of it at that point, right? And kind of figuring it out and opening up his opportunity to play different positions. And then he blows up, obviously, into a top 150 type of caliber recruit. So I think it happens more often than people even realize sometimes. Is find guys to, that's why the evaluation period in the season exists. It's like, oh, I didn't know who that kid was. And now I need to know who that kid is. Because there's also always great stories of like, this kid only played 1 year of high school football. He played 2 years of high school football, and he really was a late bloomer. And a lot of great conversations there, a lot of great stories. So I think it happens pretty often. Does Notre Dame keep any spots open for new under the radar recruits to pop up, or do they have to fill up early for some reason? Notre Dame, I think for me, Brian, like right now we're sitting, because I'm just going to talk about 2024. We're sitting today with 19 commits in the class for Notre Dame. You feel good about where you are with Bronte Johnson, to Braun Petty-Powell. You feel good about that. So, I mean, before you blink, you could be up to 21 commits in the class, which means that there's only 4 or 5 spots that are probably left in the class. So you always want to try to have something open just in case, Domer. But like if Notre Dame is comfortable with the board and they're like, that's a guy, like I'm not going to pass on him just to keep a spot open. I think it really just changes year in and year out as far as like how anxious you are to keep a spot open just in case, because sometimes the board you're happy about. Sometimes the board has to expand. Sometimes you're done recruiting pretty early in a cycle and it's just about holding on to your guys. So I think the question really is dependent upon the year. I think that can really change year to year, in my opinion.
Yeah, it definitely changes year to year, Ryan, and a lot of different things factor into it. But I think, as you said, look, if a kid really breaks out and he's good enough, you make room for him. And today's era with the portal and all the different things, you make room for him. But I think that this is just where Notre Dame is they want to load up as early as they can. You just got to make sure you're doing it the right way. And I think so far they've done it the right way. Here's kind of a question that goes along with it, Ryan. He says, do you think Notre Dame will be 95% finished with recruiting commitments before the season starts? Seems like Beasley and Scott are the only ones that might stretch out past the summer. I'd say that's accurate.
I think
now, what I would say is what Notre Dame should do is if there's some kids that you view out there that are true difference makers, stay on them.
Keep recruiting, yeah.
Yeah, stay on them. There's no reason not to. Stay on them. And, but also get a fast start on 25. I mean, that's the other thing, too, is and I'm talking like 2 or 3 kids, like let's say Elijah Rushing picks Oregon and you still want that kid, stay on him, right? I mean, there's no reason to stop recruiting. What's the worst thing you can do is say no. But I can guarantee with 100% certainty, Ryan, right? And you can't do that often in this business. I guarantee you with 100% certainty that if you stop recruiting Elijah Rushing, he's definitely not going to come to Notre Dame. I know I'm going on a limb here. You know what I mean? But so there's a couple guys like that, Ryan. There might be an offensive lineman, maybe, but I don't even know who that would be. Secondary, guys like that. There's a couple spots where I'd say, hey, I'd still stay on those guys. But there's honestly not a lot of those in the 24 class. I mean, there's not a receiver to me that I would say, hey, stay on that guy. You're not going to get Jeremiah Smith. That's about the only one that I could look at and say, hey, maybe you should stay on that guy. I mean, if Ryan Wingo wants to be interested, great. I think Ryan Wingo is very talented. His junior year didn't blow me away. It didn't. I think he's very talented, but I think the kids they have are very talented, to be honest with you. So I would mainly say a couple guys here and there, but focus on 25 because it's such a great class. It's such a great class. A couple other quick questions, kind of that I see down here, Ryan, that I wanted to point out real quick. That I didn't even think about this one. Tired of the negativity says 30 for 30 on the importance and history of why Navy's on the schedule and should be until they won out. That'd be a great one. The Navy, because I like 30 for 30s that teach me something, right? And even fans that understand it, or at least that know why they still play Navy, I think actually seeing it documented would be very meaningful to people, especially younger people that just didn't experience the way that it did. So I think that'd be a very fascinating one. I like that one a lot. ND Cheat Sheet asks, how did you guys feel about a season with Notre Dame football on Showtime during the 15 season?
I didn't see it. I didn't watch it.
I only watched this is going to sound bad. I only watched the episodes where people told me I was in it. So apparently, like what they would do is they would have coaches, like there'd be different scenes where they'd have somebody doing a show talking about it. And there was a few times where like they had me talking about whatever they were discussing. And there was one time, I think it was Todd Light was driving into work and they were acting like he was listening to my show You know what I mean? Because they were playing like clips from my show. That was pretty cool. But other than that, I didn't really watch it. But I thought I thought overall it was a cool thing because it was an interesting season. The kids seem to like it. It's not something that I would ever say, "Hey, let's do this again." I don't. Is that even still a thing? Do they even
I
still
have no
do
idea.
that?
No
Yeah,
idea.
I have no
I
idea
never
if they even
watched
still
it,
do that.
so
No, I
yeah.
mean, like, do you know if they're still doing that with other teams or not?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
That's what I mean.
I
Like
don't know.
I've never watched the series, so I have no
Yeah,
idea if it's even a thing anymore. Yeah.
yeah, not sure about that one. Let's get to some more questions here, Ryan. We've
Okay.
got one down here from John A1. This is a good one. I'll read this one. This is good for you. I'm curious to get your opinion on this, Ryan.
Okay.
What's the difference in the 2-year grade at safety, assuming Tay Johnson commits to Notre Dame, with and without Malcolm Ziegler in the 2024 class? So how do you view the 2-year grade if they get him, and how do you view it if they miss him? And let's assume that they get Tay Johnson and Tabron Benny Powell because we feel like they're in a position to do both of those. So what would your answer to that be, Ryan?
Man, John, it's tough for me to give an exact grade. Like, I feel like I need to sit down and just kind of work through, obviously, both 2023 and 2024 and like get full thought process here. But it would be substantially better with Malcolm Ziegler. I mean, if you're asking me, because I think that the thing that you got in 2023 with Ben Minnick and with Adon Schuler is you got some very high floor, good football players, right? Like, I know that they're going to be good players. You miss the upside though a little bit. And I think that what you get if you got Bronte Johnson and you got Malcolm Ziegler, you got two high ceiling type of talents, athletes in the 2024 class, on top of having Kennedy Urlacher obviously committed. So it would change it a little bit. It would change it a little bit for me because I think that for me, it's like it's more bullets in a holster, right? Like how many shots do I get at this target? If I have two really talented players, there's a decent chance that I'm going to get at least one really good football player out of the deal. If I only have one, then my margin for error becomes a little bit smaller, right? Like a little bit of a tougher spot. So I think that it changed it pretty drastically for me just because I think that those are two high caliber football players. I mean, for me, Brian, especially when I'm talking like upside grade, I think Bronte Johnson has 5-star upside at safety. I do. I think he has that type. And I think Michael Ziegler's close, probably 4.5 stars,
Yeah.
but like it's close, man.
The only thing that keeps me from having him as a 5-star is I'm still curious about how physical he's going to be. Is he just a run and cover guy? Look, first of all, I don't care if he wants to tackle. Just as a run and cover guy, he's worth taking in this class. So to me, that's a question mark, Ryan, that's what keeps him, because like that's the thing we talked about with Bronte. Bronte's skinny. Like he's gonna have to put on weight and fill out and all that kind of stuff. But there is no questioning whether or not Bronte Johnson is willing to hit. None on his film. None. There is for me with Malcolm Ziegler. And that's what keeps him from being a 5-star for me. But if he comes out as a senior and all of a sudden he's good at getting off block, and I don't care if he comes up looking like Steve Atwater. That's not what we're talking about. It's a willingness to play be involved in the physical part of the game. But even if he just comes up and shows that he's a good form tackler in space, that's all I need to see to say I think this kid's got 5-star upside, because he has, you mentioned earlier, right? Tall, long, fast, easy movement skills. He can flip his hips and turn and do all that kind of stuff. If he wanted to play corner, I'd still consider taking him at Notre Dame, knowing that, hey, as long as you're willing to be open to playing safety down the road, I would do that because he's primarily a corner in high school. So the tools are there. It's just that for me, the tackling ability is what keeps him from 5-star. Is that kind of your big holdup too, Ryan, for keeping him from being a 5-star? Or is there something else?
I mean, that's mostly it. Like you just haven't seen that part of his game at all. Like great coverage ability. Like there's great coverage ability. I also think that if we're just comparing Ziegler to Tay Johnson a little bit as well, Bronte Johnson, I also think Bronte's just a little bit longer, right? Just a little bit more explosive. I think that Ziegler might actually be faster than Bronte in a straight line, but I think that Bronte is an immediate accelerator. Like I think he gets up to top speed very, very quickly. So it's just a little bit of a different cat in my opinion. But I just think it's the separator of like, yes, Ziegler is long, but Bronte is stupid long. Like that kid is like that. I mean, he looks like a wide receiver. His body type is like a wide receiver. So I think it's the physicality and just the consistency aspect that is holding Ziegler back a little bit. I think he could get there. I think he's got incredible upside. It's just there's some unknowns to his game, especially in the run game.
Here's some intriguing big picture questions, Ryan, that I'd like for you to address for people. Here's one from Ray Holcroft. Ray says, when you talk about closing on a recruit, something we've done a lot in this show, what exactly do you mean? Do coaches use a step-by-step organized approach in closing on a recruit? If so, what are some of those steps? Let me just say one thing, big picture, and then you can get into the process, Ryan. When we're talking about closing in the show today, we're simply talking about the big picture aspect of it, which means at the end of the day, you get him. But there is a process, Ryan, and it varies from kid to kid, obviously.
Yes.
So get all those caveats out of the way. But specifically, Ryan, with some of these kids that we're looking at, what does that process look like when it's about closing on Kingston and closing on Malcolm and players like that?
Yeah, it's like you said, it varies from one to the other. I mean, closing for a Kingston Villalobos is continuing to stress the same thing consistently over and over. Keep asking, how are your parents doing? Keep talking to his parents. Keep making them comfortable. Like, that's the process of closing on Kingston, is that even when Kingston has a break from the action, he's going to visit Ohio State this weekend. Still talk to him, man. Like, still check in on him. See how he's doing. Make him know that he is a priority for you. Like, that's what Kingston is. But then there's other guys like Charles Jagasaw in last cycle, right? It was like, I had to check on Charles maybe once a week.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just was his process. But whatever your pitch is, make sure that they're getting it across to the kid consistently. I think that that's the biggest thing with recruiting is consistency. I don't want to see a guy talking to a player every single week and then all of a sudden he just goes 3 weeks without talking to the kid, right? Like, I want to see consistency. And I think that's the big thing with Notre Dame especially, is that the pitch isn't going to change. The 4 for 40, ability to play for championships, ability to be the best version of yourself as a person and as a student. But it's all about consistency. And so when I say closing on a player, Ray, keep doing what you're doing, man. It's down the home stretch, and keep making this player feel like a priority. Don't change. Don't change. Just keep the consistency of making sure that they know that no matter what you decide, no matter when you decide it, you're a priority for them. You are a priority.
And not doing it in like a douchey way.
Abrasive way.
Or like when the kid's on a visit, you're like, text them negative things about Ohio State. Like, I don't like stuff. I don't like when people do that to Notre Dame, and I don't like when Notre Dame does it to them. But that doesn't mean you can, stay on them. Okay, that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
I read that too, man. I read that too.
Okay.
I was like, what is happening?
You can go somewhere else. I think the one guy that's a bit of an exception to this, Ryan, is Malcolm Ziegler, because I do think there's still a relationship building nature to that one that's a little like with Gearby. It's not a relationship. It's just hammering home the priorities, hammering home the relationship, hammering home what makes you in a good situation. With Malcolm, it's still, you learned a lot about him this weekend and his family, and saying, okay, here's where we're behind. Yes. Let's focus on the areas where we're behind, and that's the point of emphasis. So that's where but by now, Ryan, it's like most of these kids when they're visiting in July, this relationship is so deep that there's nothing new you're going to tell them, and it just makes for an interesting recruitment. I got a super chat from Jim D. Mateus. Thank you, Jim, very, very much. Are you guys able to go to Ireland Notre Dame Navy game? Are we able? Yes, we're able. Well, I am, Ryan. I don't know with your baby if you'd be able, but we're able. I mean, you can get a passport if you don't have one. We're not going to go. And honestly, a lot of it has to do with just the fact that it's being game one. The opening week of the season for me is incredibly busy. I'm on shows, I do speaking engagements, all that type of stuff. And honestly, not only would it cost a lot of money to go there, which we can afford, we would then lose money. I don't know if I'd be able to do shows and all that kind of stuff, and some other things that kind of factor in. So I made this, and then of course the travel back, we then would miss opportunities there too. So my wife wasn't happy about it because she's my photographer. So if I went, she would go to that game. So I'm gonna have to make that up to her. But no, we're not gonna be going to that one. And I wanted to go. I'm my name is Irish and all that kind of stuff, and I've always wanted to kind of go to Ireland, but it just, if I'm going to go and spend that kind of money, I want to go when I can actually sightsee and do all that kind of stuff, and it just wouldn't be possible with that being week 1. But for all those going, enjoy. It should be a lot of fun. I wouldn't say that I'm jealous, but would be a lot of fun. Would be a lot of fun.
Well, I just think having she'll be almost 3 at that point, a 3-year-old and a less than 1-year-old on a plane for X amount of hours probably isn't too much fun. So.
Nor would it be a lot of fun for your wife to be staying here with those babies and you be over in Ireland having a good time. So
exactly.
But I'm able. Ryan might not be able. I'm able, just not going to do it this year.
Yep.
All right, let's get to some more here. Here's one from Jordan Schreiber. It says, what's your ranking range on Owen Strebig? And I like how Jordan gets us. He understands our ranking process. Good stuff, Jordan. He says, what's your ranking range on Owen Strebig and David Sanders? Are they both interested in Notre Dame?
So, Jordan, let me answer the second part first before we talk about the rankings. They are both interested in Notre Dame to different degrees, right? Like, I think that David likes Notre Dame. It's just about, like, let's get him on campus. Let's start this process off. Owen is very interested in Notre Dame. He's about to go to Notre Dame for the second time. And I mean, I literally just had a article out on him where he said Notre Dame will be in this until the end for sure. Direct quote, right? Like, Owen Strebig is very high on Notre Dame. For me, Brian, personally, watching these guys, David Sanders is a 5-star player. Like, he's just a 5-star stud. I would be surprised if he isn't a top 5 to 10 player in the 2025 class when it's all said and done. Owen Strebig for me is more I think he's a top 50 caliber football player who has 5-star upside. That's what I see. I still think he's exceptional, though. I really do.
Yeah. I have him more in the top 100 right now, but you and I look at it a little bit differently. You tend, well, maybe I'm wrong, right? You tend to look at evaluating for where they are in their grade, correct? I used to be that way. I kind of look more at it, okay, where would they be if they were in the present class, which allows for guys to kind of to go up. If I was doing a ranking of the 24 kids all in the same framework, I would not be shocked if he's in the top 50.
Probably.
I would not be shocked. He's at least, when I say top 100, I view him more like 60 to 75, like 60 to 75, 80 is where I'd see him. But he's very good. Yeah. David Sanders, I'll be shocked if he's not a top 10 player when it's all said and done.
He's shocked, man.
It's more debatable. Is he top 5 or than anything else? He's very, very talented player.
For a kid that is probably right now about 6'7" and 260 pounds, he has some absurd core strength for a guy that's 260 pounds. Like, it's insane,
and he's surprisingly coordinated for a 15, 16-year-old kid who had a pretty big growth spurt. You usually see kids like that they're kind of grown into their body and they're maybe. He's a really talented athletic kid.
Yes,
and he likes Notre Dame. I don't know. Right. I mean, right now they're on the outside looking in for him. There's some the Southern schools doing a better job. They need to try to get him on campus for a visit this summer. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. But Owen Strebig is very high on Notre Dame. So they're in a good spot there.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's one where the past relationship that Joe Rudolph has had in that state is going to help him a ton on that one. Going to absolutely help him a ton. We have another question from Kirk D.A. Anderson Fitness. Why is it harder at certain positions to get the most elite players? For example, defensive line seems to be one, whereas running backs don't seem to be one. I would disagree with that premise, Ryan. I think Notre Dame's running backs, from a ranking standpoint, are basically right where they've been at defensive line. Notre Dame's not getting any 5-star running backs. I mean, they're getting borderline top 100 guys, but not guys that are ranked super high in the rankings, in my opinion. I mean, I had Jadarian Price in the top 100. Nobody else did. I've got Kedron Young in the top 100. I think only On 3, the same or outlet that has CJ Carr ranked barely in the top 200. So, I mean,
yeah.
And so you say, well, they got Jeremiah Love last year, but they've got some defensive linemen like that. Tyson Ford was a top 100 guy coming out of high school. I mean, so I don't know that I would necessarily accept that premise. I do think where I would say, if you want to get more specific to a place where I could buy the argument, Ryan, is defensive tackle. And now Tyson Ford has moved there, but he was a defensive end coming out of high school. I think defensive end, and I think a lot of it, Ryan, has to do with, number one, Notre Dame has had. I mean, Jerry Tillery helped, but how many kids know who Jerry Tillery was at this point in time? Right. Notre Dame has not put a lot of defensive tackles in the NFL that these kids would know. They haven't had a lot of All-American type players there. And that's where the geography of where those top players tends to hurt them as well. And I think those two things right there, those three things right there are huge stumbling blocks right now for Notre Dame. And there's some others that I really don't care to get into in this type of setting, but I think those are the primary ones, Ryan, right there.
Well, I would say this too, Brian, is that for some of the positions of because we're in the NIL era now where we're all throwing pay for play into the NIL bucket, which still drives me crazy because it's not the same. Can we please stop quantifying it the same? But the fact that it's so easy to now do the pay for play stuff, there are a lot of positions that I think are more sexy for a team to overpay for a player, right? Like, let's throw all our money into this wide receiver, or let's throw all our money into this defensive end because they're important positions, right? They're important positions for where college football is now. So I also think and it's awful that we're talking economics to a bunch of 17-year-olds, but there's supply to demand as far as like the NIL side of things for I'm going to overpay for this position. I'm going to overpay for this 5-star. I'm going to overpay for this X player. I just think that the NIL era becoming blurred with pay for play has also made it tougher for Notre Dame in some positions because some positions are just such a high demand. I mean, you talk about the defensive end pass rusher. Everybody needs those kids, right? Everybody needs it. So you know who Oregon and some of these schools are going to be more likely to fit the bill for? 5-star defensive ends. So that's going to be the spot, you know?
But, I would actually, and this is, again, why I separate end and tackle, because I think that there's more ends that you can go out there and get than there are interior guys. And I think you talk about supply and demand. That's where defensive tackle becomes that type of thing, because the number of really big-time defensive tackles in today's era, Ryan, is small.
Yeah.
There's a lot of receivers out there that can go to college and be guys, right? There's not a lot of – this is why Justin Scott, to me, is so important. Yes. Because there aren't a lot of guys like him, 6'5", 310 pounds, athletic and all that. And there's definitely not guys like that Notre Dame has a chance to get. And that's what makes him so important. So I think there's a ton of good running backs out there. Not all of them are top 100 guys, but we see it all the time. It's just good backs. And those guys are so reliant on what happens in front of them.
Yeah.
Defensive line, to me, there's not a plethora of defensive tackle. There's a lot of 6'3", 6'4", athletic kids that can rush the quarterback in high school football. Some are ranked high, some aren't. Defensive tackle is a little bit of a different animal. And I think that's something that also factors into this as well, on top of the other things. So it's a very fair question. But you know what helps all that, Ryan? Winning and starting to put more guys in the NFL. So, when you get a Jason Onye, who maybe wasn't highly ranked, but you develop him, no one's going to care where he was ranked if he's a day 1, day 2 draft pick, right? No one's going to care, where Riley Mills was ranked if you can where he was ranked if you can turn him into a day 1, day 2. And that's kind of the thing, is that then starts to have an impact on the ranked kids, because they see, well, man, you put these guys out there and they weren't necessarily highly ranked, and if a Gabriel Rubio can develop into an NFL player. And I mean, that's the importance for Notre Dame right now, is start putting some of these kids that you have that have ability into the NFL. Get the most out of Tyson Scott or Tyson Ford. Get the most out of him, because he does have NFL talent, in my opinion. Turn these Bubakars and Armels and Vernons and all these young kids you're getting at linebacker, turn them into NFL players and go win with them. And then all of a sudden you'll have a better shot at winning with those guys. Yeah. Well, or winning the recruitments for those guys.
We're seeing the defensive line pipeline of Georgia being created, right, Brian? Who started it? It's Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis was a 3-star recruit. He wasn't the highest ranked guy. It wasn't like he was Jalen Carter coming out of high school. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was a 5-star. He was a 3-star recruit. He still ended up at Georgia because he's very talented, obviously. Right. But no one cares about the recruiting breakdown of where the pipeline started. No one cares about that. They care that it exists, and it makes it easier to attract.
Right. And I think you look at a guy like Trenton, it's Trenton Thompson, right?
Yeah.
Who was at Georgia, never quite panned out.
Yeah, good player.
And he was a guy that was a very highly ranked guy coming out of college. So, I know we all get obsessed about rankings and all that. Look, here's the deal. Here's what we can all agree on. You need guys that play like 5 stars. That we can all agree on. Can absolutely all agree on that. But Trenton Thompson, Ryan, finished his career. He was a solid player for Georgia. He was a good player for them.
Yeah.
Where did he get drafted?
I don't think so, actually. I think he went undrafted.
right? And so he was the number one player in the country
Yeah.
coming out of high school, according to 247 Sports. It's number 3 player according to ESPN, number 7 according to Rivals.com. All right, and he was part of the 2015 class, I believe, right? He was a 2015 signee.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Notre Dame had a 2015 signee that was recruited as an offensive lineman, was not a top 100 guy, that went out and ended up playing defensive tackle and became a first-round NFL draft pick.
Yep.
Okay. Highest he was ranked by anybody was 85th. ESPN him at 280, Rivals had him at 145. It's not always about the ranking, it's about what you become in college. And the only reason stars matter is if you want to get into a percentage argument, right? It's about getting kids that have that kind of talent. And when you start winning, that allows you to go out there and have a better product to sell. And that's why this season, Ryan, for Notre Dame is going to be so important.
Yeah.
Because you get an argument, well, you can't win unless you get those top players. Well, Clemson showed that you can balance some of those top guys with a lot of good evaluation type talented players and have a great team. And that's the model Notre Dame has to land. And then don't make the mistake of going out like Clemson did and start landing more top ranked players that don't fit what you do and who you are as a program. I think that's something that's hurt Clemson, and Dabo's getting back to what made them successful, which is good coaching and good recognition of it. So very, very good. Very, very good questions here.
Yep.
All right. Here's one from Saints Irish fan. It's a good one. How does the energy from an official visit transfer to a committed recruit becoming a student and still feel appreciated and a focus for the coaches?
Well,
basically saying once a kid gets to campus, how do you still make them feel appreciated and wanted?
I mean, it's the everyday flow of everything, right? I mean, we see Marcus Freeman at every practice and game, right, Brian? He walked to every single player and dab them up before, while they're in their stretch lines, right? Like, it's the little things, but also Saints for Irish. I think that it's about what did you, I don't want to say promise, but like you're talking to a recruits and you talk to them about, this is how you're going to fit into this program. This is what we're going to provide. This is the structure of a day-to-day situation. You need to fulfill that, right? Like, you need to fulfill that in order to make it feel like they haven't been lied to. I think that's the biggest thing, is that a player wants to feel appreciated, but they also want you to hold your end of the bargain, right? Like, they want to make sure that you do the little things. So I think for me, and this is why you have the assistant coaches you have, you need to be all on the same page. Make your guys feel appreciated. Make sure that everything that you talk to them about, and I'm not talking about promises. I'm not talking about, this and that, and this, and, a starting spot, all that type of stuff. I'm talking about, we want you a part of this because we think you could thrive at Notre Dame. Well, help them thrive at Notre Dame.
Right.
Make sure they're doing the right stuff, right? Like, that's the thing.
You talk about promises too, Ryan. Don't make those. Don't make promises you can't keep. And the other thing too is one thing that I think has helped Notre Dame with retention is Notre Dame doesn't play the game of the wild stuff, like, the wild parties and, doing all these things that you're like, this isn't really what student life is about. Notre Dame is very honest with kids. And I think that's something that you do too, is hey, this is what it's going to be like for you when you get here. And I think that's why one thing Notre Dame does a lot of making sure that kids get around other student athletes on campus. Like, hey, look, and I've been told this before, they tell kids, be honest, right? Like, yes, we want to put our best foot forward, but be honest with kids about the difficulties and the challenges, because Notre Dame's thing is we want kids to know what they're walking into. Because if you create this pie in the sky, everything is awesome type of mentality, and then the kid gets there and it's like, this is nothing like I was promised, guess what? They're going to be less happy unless they're playing right away.
Yes.
And so as long as you are hey, look, we love you. We want you. You're our dude. Like with Kingston Viliama Asa, you know what Notre Dame has never done with him? Dude, hey, we need you because our linebackers aren't very good. Right. Lie to him. And they've been like, look, we got some dudes, but we think you can fit into this room and challenge and compete. And he can. But he knows, hey, that Drake Bowen dude's a guy the coaching staff really likes. They love Jaden Osbury. They really like Person Center. They think Nolan Ziegler and Jalen C. But they also told me I'm going to get a chance to come in and compete, and the best guy's going to play. Well, when you're honest with kids like that, there's a much more likelihood, Ryan, that they're going to say, hey, you know what? This is what they told me it would be like. It would be hard my first year.
Yep.
And I think that's why it's important to really be honest with kids. It doesn't mean you don't have to tell them everything. I mean, there's always going to be experiences that are different for different players, but be very honest with kids. And I think that's something and here's the thing is give a crap about your players. If you give a crap about your players, and I'm talking about position coach standpoint, then you know what? You're going to have those kids' backs. And I've shared the story. Like, you want to know things that make Mike Mickens different from and why he shines and why he's not having kids leaving the program even though they know they're not going to start. As I said this, I talked to a parent of a cornerback that knows he's not starting this year unless somebody gets injured, right? Not that he won't have a chance if he goes on battles, but he knows those guys in front of me are dudes. And I asked, is he thinking about leaving? He's not even thinking about leaving at all. And he says, and I brought it up to my son about, do you want to consider this? Because it's just being a parent. I mean, it's like, okay, where are you at? Where's your head at? Right. And that's where it was at. It wasn't like, I want him to leave. It was more of like, where's your head at? And this is what every parent should do after the season. Okay, where's your head at? What are you thinking? What do we, And he said, didn't even think twice about it. And the big reason why is he says, because Coach Mickens still makes him feel like he's important. He still coaches him. He still believes, even if he's not starting, he's going to get developed by Coach Mickens because he was last year when he wasn't playing. That matters, man. And then when recruits visit, that story gets, hey, look, man, even if you're not playing right away, Coach Mick is still going to have you. He's still going to love on you. He's still going to teach you. He's still going to work with you. Then you're going to have other coaches like, hey, man, this is rough because they threw me down on scout. And this is something that hurt them a receiver. I've said this before in the past, before Coach Stuckey. Yep. They would throw receivers down on a scout team and just ignore them the entire year until they needed to be called up. And they're like, man, you don't care about me. So, and that's what makes the best coaches the best coaches. That's why part of why Harry Hiestand was a guy that could coach as hard as he coached and not lose dudes and keep guys engaged. It's why Mike Mickens does what he does. And that's what the best coaches do. And that helps with this too, Ryan, in my opinion. Yeah. And that's what Marcus Freeman was as a coach. And that's why when he makes hires, he needs to make sure he's being that way. Dylan McCall is that way. That's why you don't see a bunch of dudes, bailing on him, that he's recruiting because he's honest. And I still love the story, Ryan, that we told where we talked to one recruit who plays running back and he was kind of getting out of decision-making mode. And the dad knew another recruit that was committed to Notre Dame. And so he then kind of, I don't want to say set him up, but like he had some questions asked that he wanted to ask from the other kid of Dylan McCullough. And then he wanted the answers because then they were going to ask Dylan McCullough the same question and see if he was being honest with him. And the answer he gave the other dad was the exact answer he gave this kid and his dad. Yeah. Not like he told me the same thing about my son that he told that guy about his son. It was more of about both. Yeah. And the answer was consistent. And he said, okay, this is a guy that's shooting me straight because the answer he gave me isn't necessarily the best answer for that kid. And that's something that you can do when kids and parents believe that you genuinely care about them and you're honest with them. Yep. They will take hard coaching. They will take not playing for a year. They will take certain things maybe not going their way because they say, yes, but I'm still going to get my shot. This guy still cares about me. He's still coaching me. I'm going to get my chance to shine. And that's what's worked for Bama for a long time. People say, why doesn't Bama have just tons of kids leave every year because they're on the depth chart? Because they know they're going to get their chance to shine. And they're going to get coached and developed even if they're not playing. And that's something that's worked at Bama. And Notre Dame needs to be that way too. And they're getting there. It's much a better staff now in that regard, top to bottom, than it was in the past, in my opinion. There's still some work that's needed to be done. But it definitely it's better. It's getting better. Yeah.
I think K-Mac said the word genuine in the chat.
Yes.
Like that's the word, man. Yeah. Like you just have to be genuine with whatever you're doing. I agree. Yep.
Absolutely. We have a super chat down here from Kyle P. What's up, Brianosaurus Drex and Double R? I don't understand taking Tabron Benny Powell at this point. Plenty of time left for 24, and they'll always have the portal. Let me say this, Ryan.
Yep.
The taking him now thing to me depends on, are you going to say you're done? If they're going to take this kid now and say we're done at safety recruiting, that's a big mistake. And I'm just going to be honest. I 1,000%, Ryan, hope that this kid proves me wrong. 1,000%, because I don't see a Notre Dame caliber player right now. And I know that his high school coach thinks that he is, and he may very well be. We'll find out as a senior, and let's see him play safety. But the film didn't impress me. I watched every rep he took at the camp this past week. It did not scream to me Notre Dame player moving the needle. It seemed to me like you're not confident that you're going to get a third safety, and you need a third safety, and you're panicking a little bit. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope the kid proves me wrong. He's a better player, but I have to be honest. And I don't like being honest. I don't like saying it. I don't enjoy it. I have no problem being honest, but I don't enjoy saying it because I don't want to tear a kid down. Like, what if his parents are watching? I mean, these guys are hating on my kid. I'm sorry. I've heard you've got a great kid. I heard your kid did what he needed to do to help his team last year. But this is what I see on film, and this is what I saw at camp, and I can't lie to people about that. Yeah. So I don't get it either. But as long as they're like, look, we like this kid, comes from a great program. He's a hard worker. He's a team-oriented player. He can do a lot of different things. And it gives us protection in case we don't get another guy. I can live with that, Ryan, because I'll say this. If they get Malcolm Ziegler and take Tabron Benny Powell, all of a sudden I kind of like his commitment a little bit more because now you can say, hey, let's maybe look at you as a nickel rover type of guy where I think you can hide the limitations that I think he has, which are range, like vertical range, speed. But you know what he can do? Short area quickness, and he can hit, man. He can thump. Yep. My problem is I just don't think he can get to where he needs to get to as a safety to deliver the hit. You know what I mean? But now all of a sudden you're talking about like as a nickel rover, as a special teams guy, I'm okay. I'm more okay with it then. Because now he's a depth piece as opposed to a guy that's going to fill an important role. So that's kind of I'm a little to me if they get Tabron Benny Powell for me, Ryan, how I evaluate that is going to depend on what they do next at safety. That's going to be the key for me.
I just hope I'm wrong if they do. I mean, it's just the same thing as Ben Minich last year, Brian. I'm like I didn't hate Ben, but like I wasn't sold on Ben when he committed to Notre Dame. Yeah. And then he had a great senior year, and I'm like, okay, they were right.
But with Ben Ryan, he was still a much better player on film than Tabron Benny Powell. That's the difference.
I just hope that as a safety, there's that natural feel that we kind of hear is there, and that he's a better athlete than we think. And because I didn't see it personally, but if they end up with him, I hope that he ends up being a fantastic player as a senior, because I would love nothing more to sit here and be like, you know what? Tabron Benny Powell, much better football player than I originally gave him anticipated for.
I enjoy that, to be honest with you. I enjoy those stories and those moments. Josh Miller asks, you often see offensive guys switching to defense, but can you talk about some guys that came for defense and switched to offense? Off the top of my head, the primary one in that regard is CJ Procise.
Yeah,
who was recruited as a safety. CJ didn't even play running back in high school. Now, he did play receiver in high school, but he was recruited as a pure defensive back. Played safety for a year. Here's a shocker, they were thin at receiver because of recruiting. I know you've never heard that before. Moved him to receiver, had a pretty good 2014 season, had like 29 catches, over 500 yards, had the 50-yard jet sweep for a touchdown against LSU. Then they moved him to running back out of need. Mm-hmm. And the rest is history. That's the only one that I can really think of, Ryan, that was Matthias no, they were offensive guys that moved to defense. I was going to say James Onwalla and Matthias Farley, but I can't think of anybody else that was a defensive guy that moved to offense.
If we open it up to some other teams, who's that? The kid that is now playing at Ohio State, he was a transfer. He went from
the running back, the Demontre Trainum.
Yeah, so Trainum went from running back to linebacker back to running back. So he went from defense to offense and I think he's sticking at offense for Ohio State. I think so, now. So that's one, I guess.
Yeah, there's Notre Dame's had a ton over the years of guys that went the other way around. I mean, like Frank Stam started, I believe, at fullback at Notre Dame, But I other than CJ Procise, man, Josh, that's a good question. I have to really sit and think about that. Now, we've seen guys move from running back to defense back to running back. Reggie Brooks was that way. There's some guys like that. Who's another one, Ryan?
The running back that played at Baylor 2 years ago. He was a linebacker for Baylor, then he moved to running back.
The starter that they had?
Yes.
What was
that
kid's
remember his name at the moment, but he was a very good player.
I'm going to look it up because we liked him. He's a very physical runner. Abram Smith. Is that you're talking
Abram
about?
Smith. Yep.
Okay.
Abram Smith was a linebacker that
Interesting.
turned to transition to running back. Yep.
Interesting. Very interesting. Did not know that. Learn something new every day. That's a good question, Josh. When you kind of
Great question.
stump us a little bit, I feel like that's a really good question. So well done. Well done. We have a super chat from Gregory Perez. Gregory, thank you so much for that. Who would you pick out of the group of 5 to be the head coach, OC, and DC to coach Notre Dame in a world where Marcus Freeman and company doesn't exist, from scheme, culture, and recruiting? All can be from different schools. I'm not going to be able to answer the OC DC one, to be honest with you. I just don't know if I have enough familiarity with coordinators at group of 5 schools to be able to answer that question, Ryan.
Yeah.
Who's regarding
the head coach for UTSA? Yeah. Who's the head coach for UTSA? I like
Jeff Traylor.
Jeff Traylor. I like Jeff Traylor.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if that would be my pick, but that's just the name off the top of my head that I like.
Yeah. So we're going to talk American Athletic Conference, right? I think a guy that off the top of my head, I think would fit at Notre Dame from a culture standpoint. I don't know about scheme, is Willie Fritz.
Willie Fritz is a good one, yeah.
I think Willie Fritz would understand, hey, look, you're not always going to have the most talented team, but you've got to be tough and physical and coach well and all that kind of stuff. He'd be one that I'd look at. Nobody really else in the AAC, because Cincinnati's their coach is already, a year ago, if I'd have said Luke Fickell would be one, because they were but they're Power 5 team now. They're in the Big 12 now. They're moved to the Big 12. ACC is not, obviously. Let's get down to Conference USA. Jeff Traylor is really the only one there for me. The guy that was at UAB a couple years ago, I thought was a really good coach. Was it Jeff Allen? What was his name? But he had to retire. He had some medical. Bill Allen.
Clark.
No.
Billy something Clark.
Clark.
Coach
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
Clark.
Is it Jeff Clark?
No. What was his first name?
Bill Clark? Was it Bill Clark?
Might be Bill Clark.
I think it was Bill Clark. Bill Clark.
Yeah.
And then he had to retire because he had some, I believe, some health issues, like right before the season. He did a really nice job at UAB. They moved up. What year did they move up to D1, Ryan? Do you remember?
I'm not 100% sure about that one. I don't know.
Man,
I remember they dissolved the program for like a year or two there, and then they came back. Yeah.
He did a really nice job there. And I thought, yeah, I mean, you look at what he did, Ryan. Let's talk about, he inherited a team that was coming off of a 13 season in which they went 2-10.
Yep.
Their only wins were over Northwestern State and Florida International. And most of their games, Ryan, weren't competitive. They lost to Troy by 3. They lost to LSU by 39, 28 to Vanderbilt, 14 to FAU, 21 to UTSA, 3 to Middle Tennessee. They lost by 42 to Marshall. They lost by 49 to East Carolina, 3 to Rice, and then by 35 to Southern Miss. The next year they go out and they go 6-6. They went from losing to Troy to blowing Troy out.
Yep.
They lost to Mississippi State by 13. They beat Alabama A&M, beat Western Kentucky on the road, beat North Texas, beat Florida Atlantic, beat Southern Miss. They lost to Marshall by 5. They lost to Arkansas pretty bad. So, I mean, they got better and better and better. The next year they go out and they go to a bowl game. They go 8-5.
Yeah.
And he did some really nice things, in my opinion, in his career. The next year they went 11-3, which, again, at UAB, went 9-5 the next year, 6-3 during the COVID year. And then his last year there, they went 9-4 and won a bowl game. So beat BYU in a bowl game. So, and didn't they beat some good team? I remember, I thought that they beat some Division I team in a regular season game. I could be mistaking that, Ryan. In one of his years, maybe the 11-win year, didn't they have a big upset win? Or am I thinking of somebody else? Do you remember that? Was it the 2008 year that they? I don't see it. No, didn't play. Lost to A&M. I must be thinking of somebody else. But yeah, he did a nice job. He might be a guy that I'd consider, but he's obviously not coaching anymore. I
don't forget about Brady Hoke at San Diego State.
No thanks. Here's one that I would say I actually like his coordinators as well. It's Jason Candle in Toledo. I actually think he's a good coach, and he's got good coordinators.
Yep.
They've done a nice job there. I don't know if I would. I mean, Chuck Martin wants to come and be the OC. That's fine. Jeff Tedford a decade ago would have been a good answer for me.
Very good answer.
But now, I mean, he's older now. If Notre Dame got desperate, I think Troy Calhoun's a heck of a football coach.
Oh, Troy Calhoun's a really
And
good
Troy
football coach that
Calhoun
no
has
one
coached
talks
in the
about.
NFL. So Troy Calhoun, to me, is a guy that could coach a scheme that's not option because he coached in the NFL. He'd be one that I would consider if he would promise me that he's not bringing the option with him. He'd be one that I'd look at.
Troy Calhoun is one of the best coaches that no one ever says a word about. Like, he's a good coach, man.
They don't. They do not. That's pretty much it for me, Ryan. I'll tell you a guy that's on my radar is I want to see what Charles Hunt does in year 3 at Marshall.
Charles Huff.
Yes, Charles Huff.
Yeah.
Now, he was a guy that actually was a finalist for the Notre Dame running back job, but he ended up taking the Bama job instead when they hired Lance Taylor.
Yeah.
So he did a really nice job at Marshall last year, has really good assistant coach background, Penn State, Alabama. If he can continue building Marshall, that's one. Because the reason why I like him, Ryan, I like those power group of 5 coaches that have experience recruiting at an elite level.
Yeah.
And he's done that. He's had to recruit against Ohio State at Penn State. He's recruited at Bama. So he's a guy that's kind of on my radar also as a group of 5 guy that if he can build on what he did last year, he's not going to be there very long.
Yeah.
Somebody said I like Elko. That's a Power 5 team.
Yeah, it's a Power 5 team. We're talking about group of 5. Yep.
Yeah. Good question, Gregory. I just can't. I don't know enough coordinators, Ryan, to be able to answer that question at that level. I wish I did, but I only have so much bandwidth up here, and it gets less and less as I get older and older. Here's along those same lines, Ryan. Here's a good question from Irish Blooded. With all the conference reshuffling, what is a G5 school that you think has earned promotion to Power 5 on the field and could compete in their Power 5 conference? Well, the first one's easy to me because it's not just about football. That's San Diego State.
Yeah,
they've had years where they've had wins over Power 5 teams, and their basketball team just played for the national championship.
Yep.
So that would bring some value. Not that San Diego's a good sized TV market. I don't know if it's a hot and like people make this mistake with like looking at Stanford and Cal. It's a huge TV market. Well, in theory, yes, but it's not a college football area. It's an NFL area. It's not a college football area. And that's the issue with San Diego State is I don't know if it's a big enough market to where it necessarily move the needle a ton, but I wouldn't mind if I'm like the Big 12 and you're trying to keep that California footprint. I mean, to me, it'd be smart for the Big 12, or excuse me, the Pac-12 to go get San Diego State. Because did you hear the news this weekend, Ryan, that San Diego State told the Mountain West that they want to leave, that they're going to leave?
Yes.
Did you see that?
I did see that.
I mean, to me, that's like telling the Big 12 and Pac-12, hey, guys, we're going to be free agents soon. Bring your offer. And it's perfect timing because of what their basketball – I mean, their football team's been okay. It hasn't been as good under Brady Hoke as it was under why am I drawing a blank on their head coach's name? It was a long-time defensive coordinator.
Rocky Long?
Rocky Long. Yes. Yeah. I mean, Brady Hoke's not doing as well as Rocky Long did, right? Yeah. But it's not like they stink. Yeah. You know, I mean, they went 7-6 this year. They were 12-2 the year before. So that's fine. But the basketball team with Brian Dutcher, who was one of the main recruiters of the Fab Five, I'm not sure if you know that, Ryan, but he was an assistant coach at Michigan back in the day.
Yeah, he was assistant under Coach
Steve Fisher.
Steve Fisher for like 20-something years or something like that.
Yeah, long time. Including going with him to San Diego State. And then when Fisher retired, he got the job. It's a good story. But the point is, now's the perfect time to strike because you actually have something to say, hey, look, this is the value we can bring. We already showed that we can compete in your league in basketball. Because the Mountain West is a very good basketball league. Yeah. Very good basketball league. And then, hey, us joining your league is going to help us be even better in football. I think now's a good time to go get San Diego State. If you're the Big 12, honestly, if I'm the Big 12, I would look into that market, to be honest. As you look, because the Big 12 is back to 12 now with UCF. It's UCF, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati. But they can't stay at 12 because those other two leagues are growing. So they need to try and make moves to keep up with them. And the way to do that is to get the Arizonas. I mean, if you can get that whole Southwest region, Ryan, where you get Arizona, Phoenix is a growing city. Arizona is a growing state. California's losing thousands and thousands of people every year. A lot of them are going down to Arizona, which is a really growing area. if you can get that market, the Phoenix, the Tucson, Tempe, that big region, and just get that Southern California region, that's going to help you with your TV markets. It really is. So I would make a move for San Diego State if I was both the Pac-12 and the Big 12. That to me is one. Boise State to me 7-8 years ago would have had this argument, but not anymore. Not for me. Any other thoughts on do you agree with that on San Diego?
Yeah, San Diego's a good one. I mean, a couple other names that popped in my head were like Fresno State, I think, has some conversation. Maybe SMU, maybe SMU.
Memphis.
Memphis
would be one that I'd consider looking at. That'd be one. I mean, Tulsa, no. Temple, no. South Florida, no. East Carolina, no.
Oh, man. Get Temple in there, man. Get that Philadelphia market. Yeah.
You and I both know the Philadelphia area does not give a rip about Temple football.
They don't.
No MAC schools to me. No Sun Belt, no. I'm looking there. Like App State's a no. It's because it's a combination of, are you proving that you can be a competent team on the field, but it's also about, do you have a TV market that would be attractive as well? Do your other sports bring some value to it? Because like if you're a conference, the main value that Stanford would bring, other than raising your academic profile, is that Stanford has elite non-football sports.
Sure.
Like elite, especially the Olympic sports. So if you're someone who values that as an instance, as a conference, then sure that would kind of be the only reason there. But I think San Diego State right now is easy number one. SMU, Ryan would bring a little bit of that Dallas Fort Worth potential market a little bit, which for the Big 12 would make a lot of sense because you just, losing Texas hurts you a little bit in that regard, but we'll see.
Sure.
Eric Takaki says, have you heard any rumors on a new apparel deal? I've heard a lot of rumors, but nothing. Like Marcus Freeman takes a picture with two little kids at a camp wearing Jordan brand. And of course that turns into, they're going to, it's like, come on guys. Like
I was so confused, man. I saw people posting about Jordan. I'm like, where's this coming from? And
it was literally that.
Like, okay.
I was like, good Lord, people. So other than that, nothing serious. DJ Armageddon asks, what's up with the Peyton Bowen rumors? And is there any more to that situation other than rumors? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, it's just rumors at this point in time. If Peyton wanted to come back to Notre Dame, my belief would be that he would have to do all the work. He'd have to really show them, hey, you know what? I screwed up. I want to come back. If you're Notre Dame, you can't recruit him again. Yeah. He has to recruit you this time.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that would be my thing. And if he was willing to do that, eat a little bit of humble pie and be like, you know what? Like what I did was jacked up. Because here, I'm going to try to get personal for a second here, Ryan.
Yeah.
You have to leave open the thing that kids can grow up. Take the recruiting thing aside. That kid and his family suffered an awful loss recently with his sister passing away. Yep. For all we know, that might have had an impact on him, along with some other things to make him say, you know what? Like, I'm looking at my life differently now than I did a few months ago. I don't know. So the notion of just immediately saying, no, that's my first response was no. You had your chance. But then I had to like, okay, but what if the kid genuinely said, you know what? I got to grow up a little bit. And that means that I need to look at my life a little bit differently. And you know what? I had this opportunity in front of me and I screwed it up. And I'm going to do what I need to do to get it back. If he was willing to do that, I'd be open to it. I would. Because in a lot of ways, Peyton fits at Notre Dame. But if it's going to require me to convince you to come here, it's not happening. Not even remotely close to you got to convince me why I should let you come here. Yeah. That would be my stance, Ryan. Because I know your original thought on that, Ryan. What is your kind of thoughts on what I just said?
I still don't think I would pursue it personally. Like I would listen, but like
I said not pursue it, right? Just make sure we're clear.
Oh, no,
I'm not pursuing him. He's got to pursue me. He's got to win me over if I'm Notre Dame.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't even know if I would give it the time of day, to be honest. At this point, I'm just like, I muted the words Peyton and Bowen on Twitter because I'm just done with it. It's like, I'm done with it.
I understand. I get it. All right. But yeah, as of right now, though, in all seriousness, it's just rumors. It's just, I mean, we've heard so many different rumors about different things. You're just like, yeah, that's not That's not where it's going.
Yeah.
Last few, Ryan. Here,
Nothing will surprise me though. And
no,
with
nothing.
that
Absolutely
kid.
nothing.
So yeah.
Absolutely nothing. All right, let's get over to a couple more here, Ryan. Here's one from Ray Holcraft, given Sam Hartman's history at quarterback at Wake Forest, who we typically target at Wake Forest, combined with the current Notre Dame wide receiver room, which wide receiver is most likely going to have the most productive year?
Well, I mean, it's one of the outside receivers if we're just digging completely into what the Wake Forest, background is, right? So what, during his career, the guys that won most for him were A.T. Perry, and then he had some success obviously with Donovan Green and Jamal Banks this past year as well. Like those were kind of his guys. All those guys are at least 6'2" plus, over 200 pounds. Like they are bigger guys, especially AT. I mean, AT's 6'4", 200 pounds. Yeah, Jamal Banks is 6'4", 210 pounds. Like those are bigger guys. So my best guess would be Tobias Merriweather or Deion Colsey, one of those two guys, one of those long, athletic outside receivers that can win vertically down the field. If we're just judging based upon what his history at Wake Forest is, I think that would be my easiest guesses.
For me, Ryan, I think based on his history at Wake Forest, that is accurate. Although we have seen him, and it just doesn't get talked about as much, but we have seen him have success with a different body type of receiver, and that was 2020. Now it was, I believe,
Roberson.
yeah, Ja'Cory Roberson, who played a lot out of the slot. That just season gets overlooked because he didn't get to 1,000 yards because Wake Forest canceled a bunch of games that year. So we've seen him have success with different body types. It's just the last 2 years it's been outside guys. But if you look at, he says, what about the combined with the current Notre Dame receiver room? It's hard for me to see Jaden Thomas not finishing the top 2 in catches this year.
Yeah,
we'll see if he finishes in yards, but he's going to be one. And we saw him throw a lot to slot guys last year, right? It just was kind of broken up between a couple guys.
Yeah.
Taylor Marin, Keyshawn Williams, those kind of guys, those shorter guys, because those two kids combined for 86 catches and 1,128 yards.
I think Morton was banged up
10
a little
touchdowns.
bit too.
Yeah, so. He played. So I mean, and they're both 5'10".
Yeah.
So we've seen it, but it's just when you watch the highlight tape, it's the bombs to A.T. Perry and that type of thing that you see. So I think, so you said the outside guys are most obvious. I think right now I'd probably say Tobias Merriweather's in a better position than Deion Colsey based on just being solidified in that spot. The other reason I'm going to say Jaden Thomas too, Ryan, is you and I agree on this. I don't believe Jaden Thomas is going to be purely a slot guy this year.
Right.
And we already saw it in the blue gold game. He caught his post route that he caught was from the outside. And so that's kind of where we're gonna be on that one. I want to respond to this too. 9911 Brian Ward, first person that never messed up, throw the first stone. It has nothing to do with that. You're this is regarding to Peyton Bowen. It's not about throwing the first stone. It's like, how many times can you get burned before you say, hey, I'm not gonna get burned again. You know what I mean? If your relationship with a lady and she cheats on you multiple times, at some point in time, you can say, I forgive you, but I'm not going to stay in a relationship with you. Right. Yeah. That's it. It's unhealthy. It's unproductive.
It was months and months. It wasn't just like a one-off situation. Like it was months and months and months.
Correct. So it's not about him screwing up. It's about, can I trust that what you tell me is going to be here? Are you going to come here and get disenchanted with where things are and leave like you did there? It's about a pattern of behavior that says, I can't go down that path again. Now, you want to pursue me. You want to show me that you've changed, that things are different. I'm open to hearing that. Right. But it's not about this. I think that's kind of a too narrow way of looking at it. And also looking at it from standpoint of, you're not properly responding to what we're actually saying.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. Is he wasn't a kid that just, I've said this, Keon Keeley decommitted from Notre Dame, left him high and dry, went to Bama. If Keon Keeley called me tomorrow and said he wanted to come, I'd say absolutely. Now, do I think Keon's so much better than Peyton that I'm willing to be okay with something he did wrong? No, it's because Keon Keeley was always honest up front with Notre Dame. There's no bad blood there. There's no bridges that were burned. He made a decision he felt was best for him that hurt us, but there's no animosity. There's no, hey, you screwed us over. There's none of that. He was straight with us. He decommitted first, then went on visits and his officials and did what he did. And there was never any lying or dishonesty or playing us. They got played by Peyton Bowen last year.
They did.
I mean, hey guys, I want to come, and on the phone with them until wee hours in the morning. I definitely still want to come. I want to come, and then boom, an hour later, hey, by the way, I'm picking Oregon. Like, seriously? You know what I mean? And no, I'm not going to Oklahoma. I'm just going there with my girlfriend. I'm just going there with my brother. I'm just, you know what I mean? And just for months, this went on.
Okay.
And looking back, it's like he wasn't being honest with them, right? And so that's the difference. So now you got to prove to me that you're trustworthy, and it's not by me convincing you to come here. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. So I just want to make sure that if you're going to disagree with us, which is more than fine, Brian, at least disagree with what we're saying, and don't try to turn it into something that we didn't say, because we didn't say that. Here's a last couple here, Ryan. Levi Perez with a good one. In your opinion, how does Notre Dame's class compare to Ohio State and Michigan's at this very moment?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I will give Michigan a whole lot of credit. Michigan has really upped their game, obviously, on the recruiting trail this year. I mean, we were just last cycle, we're like, man, where's the impact from being a good football team coming in? You know what I mean? So I think for me, Levi, and this is largely because I think Notre Dame's offensive class is just stellar in 2024. I think Notre Dame still has the best class of the three. I think that it's going to be an interesting conversation when everything fulfills. So I think this is a better question on National Signing Day. Let's compare the Midwest powers all together at that point. But Michigan's taken a step forward. Ohio State always recruits at a high level, but I still think Notre Dame has done a tremendous job as we're staying here today, and that's mostly because offensive recruiting has been spectacular this year so far.
I would rank Notre Dame ahead of both of them for different reasons. Number one is they have way more players than Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State's at 14. Of the two schools, Ohio State has a much better chance of having a class that I view as being better. And first of all, I don't care about rankings. I don't. So I evaluate the class. Ohio State has a much better chance at catching and passing Notre Dame than Michigan does. Michigan actually has two more recruits than Notre Dame in their class. Ohio State's at 14, I think right now, Ryan. And there are some dudes still on the board for them, right? And there's a lot of high-level talent. Now, Ohio, here's my thoughts on Michigan, right? I think you're spot on. Michigan is finally capitalizing on their playoff appearances this year. Yep. Having said that, I still think their class is a little overrated. It's ranked number 2 on Rivals right now. I don't know where it's at until 24/7, but that's because of that's volume. If you go look position by position, to your point, I don't see a position on their board where I would take their class over Notre Dame's and what I think Notre Dame's is going to be. And the other thing that hurt them is a couple guys they really wanted that were going to be big-time guys for them, they missed on. Yep. And Aaron Childs picking Florida was a big one. That was a big loss for them. There's some other guys on the board. There's an offensive lineman that's going to be there that a lot of people think they're going to get, Michael Uni. But to me, I don't care what the ranking says. Jaden Davis is not a better prospect than CJ Carr. He's not. And I believe our guy Antoine will say the same exact thing. I like their running back class of Jordan Marshall and Michael Capana, but it's not as good as Notre Dame's. They have a 2-man receiving class of Channing Goodwin. And I don't know if you've seen him, Ryan. Channing Goodwin from Providence Day. He's Jaden Davis's top receiver. He's a good football player. I like that kid. And Rival says him as a 3-star. I think he's a little better than that. Morian Stewart from Illinois is a 4-star kid. He's a quality player. It's a good pickup for them as well. Brings them a little different body type, 6 foot, quick kid, shifty kid. I like him. That's not as good as Notre Dame's receiver class. They were desperately trying to get Micah Gilbert, and then Notre Dame beat him. Their tight end class is really good. They got 2 4-star kids. Right now, it's better than Notre Dame's. Brady Prieskorn's a good football player. I like Jack Larson a little bit better, but they also got Hogan Hansen, who's also a good football player, kid from Washington. If you get Carter Nelson, it's over with. Their offensive line class, I actually like a lot. There's some guys in there that I don't necessarily love, but as a group, it's a really good class, and that's exactly what Michigan has thrived at. As I look at that class, Ryan, I really like Blake Frazier. But the other kids I look at, whether it's Luke Hamilton or Ben Robach or Andrew Sprague, Jake Gardnera, none of those guys are I love you guys. I didn't want Andrew Sprague at Notre Dame. It's Sprague. I keep saying Sprague, but I believe it's Sprague. But when you look at what Michigan has done as a unit, you can all see where they fit into that offense. And that's exactly what Shamar Moore has thrived with, is now you're not having any elite individual talents, but like these big, tough kids that can move people, coach them up, and get them to go and work together. And I think that's what this offensive line class does. So it's a good class. Defensively, the linebacker class is not very good, in my opinion. I'm not in love with Zach Ludwig. You all know my thoughts on Cole Sullivan. Mason Curtis is a pretty athletic kid. Their defensive line class, Jared Smith is a kid that Notre Dame passed on. Ted Hammond is a kid Notre Dame never wanted. Manuel Bigel he's their Sean Silviano. And then Owen Wafel. That's a guy that I would have taken. That's their best pickup so far. But the rest of their class is guys that just Notre Dame didn't want or passed on. There's no Logan Thomas in their defensive line class. There's no Cole Mullins in their defensive line class. So I'm taking Notre Dame's defensive line class. And then their secondary class is very much still a work in progress, but they got Jacob Oden and Jaden Smith. And again, Jacob Oden's a guy that Notre Dame dropped a year ago. So right now, there's just no position there other than tight end that I would say they're better than Notre Dame at when you stack them up next to each other. Now, the rankings might tell you otherwise, but they're not, in my opinion. Now, they have the only chance they have of really jumping up. You know what they are? They're Notre Dame from past years where they rank real high early because they got a bunch of kids, but then slowly fall to the bottom of the top 10. That's going to be Michigan this year, unless they can pull an upset for Bryce West and Aaron Scott. You do that, and now all of a sudden, okay, I like this class a lot more. But Ohio State's sitting there with some big-time players where they could add 7 or 8 guys that are all top 100 caliber guys. Right.
KJ Bolden's of the
Yes. They had the 2 Georgia kids or Southern, it's Dylan Stewart, who's from DC. They had Eldrick Houston up this weekend. They're a lot of people feel like they're the team to beat now for Brandon Baker on the offensive line. They've got a shot to get there. Now, what's going to hurt them is if they lose to Michigan for Aaron Scott and Bryce West, because I think those 2 kids are going to go to the same school, in my opinion. So to me, as long as they get those 2 guys, they're going to end up with a top 3 class. Now, I like CJ Carr better than Aaron Noland, but it's a whole lot closer than Jaden Davis and CJ Carr, in my opinion. Okay. I like I like Notre Dame's running back class more than Samuel Peoples and Samuel Dixon, but it's close. I really like Peoples. Have you seen him, Ryan? I have not. It's a good player. I think Kedron Young's the better running back out of Texas, but he's a good back. Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham is an excellent 1-2 punch. Notre Dame is only ahead now because I think they have more. Yeah. But when Ohio State matches them in numbers, I think they're going to have the better receiver class. As long as it's even if it's a Jeremiah McClellan type of guy, who I don't think is as good as the guys Notre Dame has. As much as I love the Notre Dame kids, none of them are as good as Jeremiah Smith. You know what I mean? I don't think so. Max LeBlanc, a tight end, is not, to me, I like Jack Carson more. Offensive line-wise, they have some solid players. They have the Armstrong twins who are good, solid players. Ian Moore's a good player, a little overrated. A lot of those linemen are a little overrated. Linebacker, the thing is going to be, how are they going to finish on defense? They have 3 defensive commitments right now. Now, 2 of them I absolutely love. Love Jalen McClain. He was the number 1 safety on the board for me. Love Garrett Stover. He's who I wanted at Rover. I mean, so Peyton Pierce is a good player. I'm actually okay that he didn't stick, especially if Notre Dame gets Kingston, because I like Bodie Cahoon's ceiling more than Peyton Pierce's ceiling. They got to finish, Ryan. And if they miss out on Bryce West and Aaron Scott, that could hurt their secondary class a little bit. But if they get KJ Bolden and Jalen McClain at safety, good luck finding a better safety class in this year than that group. You know what I mean? So Ohio State has a chance to finish ahead of them, in my opinion. But as you said, right now, Notre Dame has the group because they have more guys. Yeah. And that's why it's hard to really give a thorough, we're kicking your butt right now, because Ohio State's recruiting in a different place. They're recruiting to the higher, bigger 5-star kids that are going to take longer to jump on board. Right. That's the reality of it. So now some of the guys they're looking for, I don't necessarily love, like Marquise Lightfoot. He's ranked really high. People, that's not a needle mover for me. I'm sorry. I'll take Logan Thomas and Cole Mullins over him every day of the week, and so would Notre Dame. Because here's the reality. That's the one kid that Ohio State might get that you look and say, if Notre Dame wanted him, they'd have him. That's the one that you could say that for. I think the other one is Ian Moore. If Notre Dame would have wanted Ian Moore early, he's going to Notre Dame.
Yep.
They passed on him. But Notre Dame recruited Jeremiah Smith, and he didn't give him the time of day, right? I mean, it's just the reality of it. You know, they wanted Garrett Stover, and Ohio State beat him for him. They
Yes,
loved
did.
Garrett. They wanted Peyton Pierce, and Ohio State beat him. Now, I will say this. The Notre Dame staff, once Laurinaitis left, was not as high on Pierce. That was more of a James. I mean, you agree with that, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
James Laurinaitis loved Peyton Pierce more than Al Washington and Marcus Freeman did. But they still would have taken him if he wanted to come. So that's a loss. I mean, there's no spinning it. And then, of course, they love Jalen McClain and just flat out got beat for him.
Yes.
But so they got a shot to have a great class. Now, here's the question, Ryan. They get a lot of these highly ranked kids. They had this happen last year as they just those NIL teams just slowly started chipping away at some of those guys, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the question that I'm going to have is, do they lose any of those guys? That's going to me go a long way towards determining how good that class ends up being. But
that's why I said, Levi, this is a great question for signing day.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things will change.
I like what he said, at this very moment. That's a good way of saying it. Matt Lee has a couple here real quick, Ryan. He says, Brian and Ryan, you always seem to talk so highly of the 25 class. Who are a few of the favorite kids for each of you as of now? So I'm bringing this question up, Matt, to say we're not going to dive into that right now because that is going to be the topic of our next couple weeks shows. So Ryan and I talked about this earlier today. We're going to start the next month, Ryan, July, barring there being like news, like breaking news on the recruiting trail. Yeah. We're going to start really introducing you to some of our top 25 kids. So we'll do different position groups. And like when we say position groups, it's probably like, quarterback, running back, receiver, O-line, tight end in another one, front seven in another one, secondary in another one, that type of thing. So that'll kind of be, I guess we don't have to have our post-show meeting now, Ryan, because that's pretty much what we're going to discuss. But that'll be so Matt, we'll get into that. We're also still kind of, working through who Notre Dame likes, but we'll have a lot of this the next week. But let's just, for right now, Ryan, give them a little teaser. Give me two kids on both sides of the ball that right now that you look at and say, those are my dudes that I love and feel that are must-gets for Notre Dame in the 25 class on both sides of the ball. Mine's kind of easy on offense right now. It's Deuce Knight and Talon Taylor are the top two on my board. Talon Taylor's my number one 2025 kid of all positions that I want to get in this class, offense or defense. That's my number one. Do you have two on the offensive side of the ball right now, Ryan?
If you would have asked me this a couple of weeks ago, Nate Roberts probably would have been one of my two, but
yes,
now he's committed in the class.
Ryan loves that kid, and not just because they have the same last name. I promise you.
I love that kid, man.
It's the film. I promise. The name is a nice little cherry on top.
Yes, exactly. Deuce Knight is definitely one, though. Like, there's no doubt. I love the quarterback out of Mississippi, and Owen Streebig would probably be one.
Yeah, we're both.
I love Owen, man, out of Wisconsin, big offensive lineman, 6'8", 290. He's a really good physical football player, man. I like that kid a lot.
Yeah. All right, Ryan, who would you say on the defensive side of the ball are some of the guys that you really like that you view as, okay, this is a guy that Notre Dame has to go out and get?
There's so many guys, man. I think for me, because I mean it's still early on in this process, obviously, but I think for me, one would definitely be Jordan Young, safety out of North Carolina. I love Jordan, man. I think that kid is an absolute stud. Like, I really, really like him a lot. I mean, and then the other defensive, Nathaniel Marshall's a kid that I think is very good. Obviously out of the Chicago area. Justin Hill is another kid that
the kid from Cincinnati? Yeah, he's really good.
Big linebacker. He's like
Ryan, do you view him as being a linebacker? Or do you think he's going to eventually grow into a Viper when it's all said and done?
I think either reality could work. I mean, I honestly, like 10, 15 years ago, I'm like, that's my Sam linebacker. I'm playing him on live scrimmage a ton. You know what I mean? Like, that's that kid. But Justin Hill is a really good football player, man. I like him a lot. But I want to phrase this better. Jordan Young is probably the most impressive player defensively that I've watched so far.
He's really good.
Sport.
That's Noah McHale for me.
Yeah,
Noah McHale's my guy. It's like that's the dude. I'm kind of torn, Ryan, on that linebacker. So I'm just going to say like they're kind of my 1A and 1B, and that's if Notre Dame next year's linebacker class includes Noah McHale and Anthony Sacca,
Anthony
I'm a
Sack is a
happy
good
dude.
one too.
I'm a
Anthony
happy
Sack is a good
dude.
one.
Those are
Yeah.
guys. And you can throw in, there's some other, it's a really good linebacker
Christian
class.
Jones is a good player
Christian
too.
Jones
Yeah.
is another one. Justin Hill's another one that's a really good football
Landon
player.
McComber is a really talented
Yes, he is.
rover as well.
Yes, he is. Yes, it's a really good linebacker class. A really, really good linebacker class. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng is a guy that a lot of I don't have a lot of optimism about getting a kid from IMG. That's
I was
really
about to say when he transferred to IMG,
I was like, well, they're not going to get that kid. That's kind of how I was. Yeah, that's how I was. If I had to pick a front seven guy, it's either Nathaniel Marshall or Christopher Burgess for different reasons. Nathaniel Marshall is a better player now, but Chris Burgess, man, just screams upside. And I think you look at that kid now. I was talking to somebody that covers Notre Dame, and I forget which guy told me this, but he said that he was talking to his coach or his dad. And who was it? I think it was Kyle Kelly told me this. I think it's who it was. And you know Kyle well. Kyle's a good dude. But he said that he was told by the dad, like, he just started lifting weights in like the last couple of months. I'm like, seriously? That kid just now started lifting weights? He's like, yeah, he just does a bunch of push-ups. So I was like, he's been on the Herschel Walker workout plan up until recently. I think he's going to end up growing to a 3 technique and just and be a dude. Yeah. So I've really gotten to like Christopher Burgess a lot more. So he'd be my front seven guy probably. I love the line. I love the trio of McHale, Saka, and Christian Jones at linebacker. And Jordan Young's the best DB on the board. You know who's a sleeper guy, Ryan, that I think is going to he's following the same path as a kid from his high school. Cree Thomas is woefully underrated right now as a corner. Yeah. I love that kid's film. Absolutely love that kid's film. And he's a 3-star, and 2 of the service haven't even ranked him yet. So it's like, have you guys not learned yet about Arizona as a state you need to start paying more attention to? Have you still not learned this? You guys going to make the same mistake with him you made with Benjamin Morrison? Yes, the answer is yes, they are.
The answer is yes.
But I love that kid too. But Jordan Young is a dude.
One guy that talks really well of Notre Dame early on that I loved this film was Chuck McDonald out of Modern Day.
Yes.
Too, man. He's good. He's good.
Now, where do you see him playing? Because I kind of view him as maybe being more of a safety type than a pure corner type at the next level.
I think he's going to be a boundary corner or safety potentially. Like, I don't think he's a field kid, but like that kid is physical.
Really talented. Well, it's not that he can't run like a corner, Ryan. It's just like, do you really want him moving away from the football, or do you want him running towards the football?
It's fair.
And that's where I come from on that. Because not every kid that moves from corner to safety is moving because he can't play corner.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, I just think this guy would be an even better safety.
Yeah.
And that's how I view a kid like Chuck McDonald. And then you have his coverage ability as a safety.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, Ryan. He speaks very highly of Notre Dame.
That modern day defensive back grooming for the 2025
their entire
kids, the Dixon kid,
Ryan, defensive backfield. Are you kidding me? It's their entire defense. I mean, they've got like 3 2025 linebackers that Notre Dame has offered already. It's nuts. Because you got Abdel Sanders, Nasir Wyatt. I mean, it's just like, you got to be kidding me.
Nasir Wyatt's only like 6'2", 215, but they throw him at defensive end, and he's just ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, man. It really is. They're 25, and they got the running back, the Davison kid at running back. I mean, they're stacked. They're stacked. It's a great year. I mean, this is what we kept saying it. I mean, I shouldn't have even said 2, Ryan. It was very unfair to say 2 because it's just hard to pick only 2 dudes in the 25 class. It's I mean, Cooper Perry's a kid at receiver I like a ton.
I like Cooper a lot, man.
There's some really good players. Some really good players in next year's class. So I'll tell you a kid who I watched recently that jumped into my favorite lineman film. I hadn't seen Rowan Byrne yet prior to him coming to the Irish camp. That kid's film is impressive.
Yeah, he's physical.
Very impressive.
Yep.
So,
I don't know what they're feeding some of these kids, man. I mean, Rowan Burns 6'6", 290. He looks bigger than 290
and he looks older.
Street big. Like,
it's
nuts, man.
Absolutely nuts.
I'll tell you what, the smallest guy on the board, offensive line wise, the Josh Petty kid out of Georgia's got some good film, man.
Yes.
He's really
now you've said that to me a couple times. I haven't watched him yet.
That kid can move, man. He can move. He's good.
Here's a comment that Matt Lee made, Ryan, from earlier city. I've heard players from the 88 team say that they knew nobody was going to beat them after they beat my undefeated Miami, and it showed because they destroyed everybody. That included second-ranked USC. And that's kind of, we were talking earlier about Notre Dame and Ohio State, just looking at it from the 2023 season standpoint. I think he's absolutely right about that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I just feel like it's whether you want to look at 1988 Notre Dame, Miami. Now, part of the reason they destroyed everybody after that was they didn't play anybody any good after Miami. They played Air Force, who was good. They were actually good that year. Well, no, actually they weren't good. They were good at the time. They were like 5-2 at the time. Ended up losing the rest of the way. But Air Force had a lot of ranked teams back there under Fisher DeBerry. They beat Navy, but that was blew out Rice. Rice stunk. Then they beat Penn State 21-3 in a very convincing win, but that wasn't a very good Penn State team. And then, of course, they whooped USC, who was the number 2 team in the country. But that's part of it, too. But I think a more recent example is the 2012 team. Everybody points to the Oklahoma game as that moment that they knew that Notre Dame was going to be good. And I've said, no. That happened a couple games before when they beat Stanford. When Notre Dame beat Stanford, that was the team where you looked at and said, okay, now you just know that they slayed that dragon. Nobody's beaten Notre Dame this year in the regular season. Nobody is.
Yeah.
And that's what the Ohio State game could be for Notre Dame. If you can come out of that game with no blemishes, it could make Notre Dame hard to beat because it's that final, like, you know, you're good. That 88 team knew they were good. They weren't afraid of Miami. But it's one thing to believe you're good, and it's another thing to know you're good.
Think and know, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And when you beat Ohio State, you know you're good. But until then, you always have to have that little bit of doubt in the back of your mind.
Yep.
Yes, you can talk all you want. Notre Dame fans love talking trash Ohio State fans, and that's all fine and dandy. Have your fun. But the reality is until you beat them, that's all it is talk. You know, and that's what is going to make that game huge.
Yes.
Absolutely huge.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. Well, that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Ryan, thank you. Great job. It's definitely glad to have you back. If you have not seen some of his intel on the board, we threw most of it out here for y'all today just because we wanted y'all to get a sample of it. But you're definitely going to want to sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We're going to have a lot more stuff on that. So definitely do that. Even if you're not a message board person, you don't have to post a lot. You don't have, but it's good to be on there just to get the intel. But also it's a way to support us at Irish Breakdown, and we appreciate that very much. Before we hit the road, everybody, do us a favor. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast. 6 o'clock tonight, IB Nation Sports Talk. They'll be there to talk about it. We're going to probably, starting next week, launch a lot of our season preview stuff of not just the team, which we've already kind of started. Vince and I tomorrow will be together talking about the Notre Dame wide receiver core, but I'm talking the national stuff. We're going to have sort of our top 25, our top 10 players, certain position lists. That stuff's all going to be on CFB Nation. So make sure that you subscribe to the CFB Nation YouTube channel because we're going to have some live shows on that, but also make sure you subscribe to the CFB Nation podcast platform. If you are a podcast listener and you like listening to Lucky Lefty and CFB All America, those shows are going to be coming off of the Irish Breakdown feed very, very soon. So if you want to listen to those, you need to subscribe to the CFB Nation podcast app. You can find it at Apple, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. And there's also going to be links. We're going to start putting links to it in this channel as well, starting next week as well. So sign up for that as well. Have a great day. Rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. For Ryan, I'm Brian. Have a great day. And the guys will see you at 6 o'clock for IB Nation Sports Talk. I will see you tomorrow. And if you want to get a hold of Ryan, place to be, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check it out. Talk to you all very soon. Thanks for joining us on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.